IB Nation, welcome back to the Irish Breakdown Podcast, coming to you guys live here on a Monday on YouTube, which of course means Monday free-for-all mailbag. Going to work through a lot of the great questions that you all have already queued up in the chat. This one's for you folks. Every day other than Monday, we get to go through as many questions as possible and let you all steer the great conversation here on the Irish Breakdown Podcast. But today, you guys get to make the call. So Ryan Roberts, Brian Driscoll, bringing you guys everything that you want to talk about today. It's no holds barred, guys. You guys can talk about Notre Dame football. Of course, you could talk about this past weekend's junior day and all the recruiting info that we have put out at boards@irishbreakdown.com over the last couple of days. You can also ask about college football. You can ask about NFL. You can ask about random questions. The questions are up to you all. The topics are up to you all. And we're ready to roll here. Ryan, I don't know if you're ready, but ready to go, man. Uh-oh.
T-Guns.
Uh-oh.
T-Guns.
Yes.
Sports questions. My man, sports questions.
Aliens are real. Aliens are real.
You saw exactly, Ryan, you know everybody else is 99% of people going to take it the right way. But my man, T-Guns, is going to be like, oh, no holds barred. Okay. There we go. Let's rock and roll.
Well, I forgot to tell you, but Tommy started talking about aliens on the podcast, and he started texting me GIFs of aliens as well, which was fun during his show. It's fantastic.
That will not be what we discuss today. Will not be what we discuss today. But I'm ready to get rocking and rolling.
Unless he gives us a super chat. Then we have to talk about aliens, right? I mean, that's
I always have discretion on what does or doesn't come up. But let's rock and roll. Let's rock and roll.
David M with the first question of the day. And by the way, super chats do get the first come, first serve, right? So if you want to throw a super chat in there, if you want to get ahead of the line, you have to wait to question 97. You can get right up to the front of the line. It's like the easy pass when you go to when you're driving, but I was talking about the
all right.
What's the fast pass at Disney? That's what I'm trying to think. Whatever the heck
so you just made me laugh because we were yesterday. I was taking Angela to the airport yesterday because she's flying. She's actually about an hour away from you right now, Ryan. She's in Newark till tomorrow, and then her and her mom are leaving on a trip. But there was this older gentleman in front of us yesterday at the toll booth, and he didn't have his Easy Pass on right, and so he's standing there like going like this. And we're there for like 2 minutes. So finally I had to get out of my car. I had to get him to back up. I had to show him how to hold it. And he's like, now what do I do? I said, slowly drive up. And it's like, we stood there for like 3 minutes. So I'm sitting there in shorts in the middle of the snow, showing this older fella how to use, because he's just going like this. I'm like, my man, you are too far in. You have missed it. You got to come back. That was cold. I was very cold when I had to do that. But you just made me laugh when I thought of that.
It's been kind of cold the last couple of days.
Yes, it has. Yes, it has. But David M's going to get us started. Let's rock and roll, buddy.
David says, do you have any insight into why Notre Dame never offered J.J. McCarthy? Was it simply that Brian Kelly liked Tyler better? Do you think J.J. would have come to Notre Dame if offered?
I do think he probably would have come to Notre Dame if offered, and that was the school that he liked a lot early. I can't say certainly that he would have because I know he also liked Michigan, but at the time, I think Notre Dame was a little bit of a hotter program. If you remember, Ryan, he was part of the 2021 class, so that was Notre Dame had been in the playoff 2 of the 3 years at that point in time. Michigan was coming off of a couple decent seasons, and then obviously, they had the 2020 disaster, but Notre Dame just liked Tyler Buchner better. So did I at the time. I mean, look, guys, before the injuries and the quarterback coach changes to delivery and all this kind of stuff, like Tyler Buchner was a dude. I mean, he was an absolute dude. But that's why it's so important to, injuries can factor into this. How you're developed can factor into it. There's just a lot of things that go into, whether or not a guy reaches his peak. Some people like J.J. McCarthy better at the time. I get that. But I like Tyler better. I mean, Tyler's junior film, Ryan, was about as dynamic as you're going to get. I mean, it was outstanding. I know the competition stunk, but he could spin it. He could run. He was just a really good quarterback. He just missing a senior year and then all the injuries just.
Lack of development early.
Getting a quarterback's coach that wanted to mess with his throwing motion, which just I'll still never understand that. If a quarterback's coach, to all y'all out there, if your kid's above the age of 13 and you've got some quarterback coach and your kid's good and you've got some quarterback coach who's telling you, hey, we need to change this throwing motion, just say no, man. I'm going back to 1980s, right? Just say no. right? Just say no, because they've got to tell you something to convince you to spend your money with them. That's the reality of it. And a good quarterback's coach 9 times out of 10 is going to say we may do like a little tweak to how you grip the ball, your release, but they're not going to alter your entire throwing motion if you're already a pretty good player. They're going to work on footwork. They're going to get your core involved. They're going to teach you how to read properly. They're going to work on all that kind of stuff to enhance what you do. If they're talking about breaking down what you do, unless your kid is a 40% completion guy now, right? But if your kid's already pretty good, just say no, man, because we saw Brandon Wimbush. We saw it, even with Ever Golson to a degree, although that was more mental than anything. But we saw it with Brandon and Phil Dracovic, who had someone working with him in high school after his career was over. And we saw it with Tyler Buckner, where, they get these guys to say, I got to change your throwing motion. And it's kind of like, yeah, you're too late for that, man. Like you enhance the other stuff. You don't need to change somebody's throwing motion.
It's a real shame. I know a lot of really good quarterback coaches, man. It's just these like few bad apples that just kind of make you kind of turned off at the idea of a private quarterback coach. It's a real shame because there are some good ones out there, man. But yeah, unfortunate, very unfortunate. All right, and our next question is from Raymond Harton. What's up, Raymond? Hey guys, what is the status of Max Bulla? Thanks.
Right now, he's still with the team, still part of the staff. Yeah. I don't know what the future holds for him or what's going on, but right now he's still part of the staff, which is a good thing because I think he did a great job this year for Notre Dame. I really do.
I think he did a tremendous job. Of all the people that were upset about the James Laurinaitis loss, and I get it from a name recognition perspective and the relationships he had with some of the recruits at the time, I mean, Max Bulla, I think, just unequivocally did a better job as a football coach in his first year compared to what James Laurinaitis did. So maybe Laurinaitis is that dude now, or he will be in the future. But compared to what you saw year one of James Laurinaitis versus what we saw year one of Max Bulla, I thought Max Bulla did a really good job for Notre Dame this year.
Absolutely.
Paul Hamilton with the question. Thank you, Paul. What do you honestly think is even the reason why Tyler Buckner didn't pan out? I was so high on him out of high school. I don't think we ever saw anything close to his true potential. We started talking about this
did something happen with Tyler today? I'm fine answering this question. I just was there some news about? Okay,
I would assume because there is usually a kind of a trend that happens in chats. I would assume that maybe someone mentioned Tyler in the JJ McCarthy question, and then he was like, "Oh man, yeah, whatever happened to Tyler? Like that was kind of weird progression, So
yeah, Paul, it's a very fair question. Here's a couple things for me that factored into it. It was the continuous missing of time that he battled through. Like the sophomore year by itself doesn't hurt him because he missed all but I think he got hurt first half of the first game of his sophomore year, hurt his ACL, comes back as a junior, electric, and then misses his senior year. So like if you just missed the sophomore year, you just missed the senior year, I think it would have been okay. But then, he misses both. Then he comes to Notre Dame. He has the private quarterback. I mean, we started to see it in the Elite 11 stuff. You started to see like this weird throwing motion that he didn't really use in high school, and the ball just wasn't coming out of his hand properly, and all these type of things. And then he comes to Notre Dame in his first year, and he's just kind of a niche player, and they're not really developing his overall game, which is fine. I mean, that was you needed to have him do that. I was okay with the role they gave him as a freshman because he brought some dynamic ability. You can't justify having a kid like that on the bench. And then he comes out as a sophomore and gets hurt again. I mean, look, yeah, I know he didn't get off to a good start, but think about what Tyler did in the bowl game. And imagine if he had like 10 more games of that kind of development all of last season. I doubt that Notre Dame's going in the portal last year, Ryan, at least not for a Sam Hartman type of guy. I don't think there would have been a need for the portal. You'd have had Tyler. I don't think Drew leaves if he's Tyler's backup all year. I think Drew left because he got a shot to start. He thinks he did well, went 8-2, and then got kicked to the curb, basically, in bowl prep, which is, I think that kind of upset him. So you'd have Tyler, Drew, you'd have Kenny, and you'd have Steven and Kenny. So I don't know. I think Tyler would have been the starting quarterback this year. Now, there was a lot of things that he needed to continue to improve about his game and not turning the ball over. But, Tyler showed in glimpses at Notre Dame why he was a big-time recruit. I think the bowl game was a perfect example. The interceptions were maddening, but those things can be corrected. but the playmaking was indisputable, Ryan. I mean, it was absolutely undisputable that game. The plays he made was arm and his legs in that game. You're like, that's why Notre Dame wanted Tyler Buchner. And then he made the poor decision to transfer to Alabama. I mean, so some of this has been bad luck, injuries, things like that. That's not his fault. Some of it is poor decision making on the behalf of him and his family. The quarterback's coach is a senior, and the decision to go to Alabama were both huge decisions that led to him not panning out. And I'm not upset about it. I think the world of Tyler, and anyone you've ever we know someone on our board, Ryan, is a professor at Notre Dame, had him in class and had him and Drew in the same class. He's like, they're both awesome kids, just great kid, in there every day, working hard and all that kind of stuff. But decisions have consequences, Ryan. And I think both Drew and Tyler made poor decisions last year. Not even just a transfer. I mean, if you don't want to be here, you don't want to be here. But where they transferred to, I think was a poor decision by both of them, to be completely honest with you. And things like that can crush you. I mean, they can really, really alter your entire career. And when you combine that with injuries, you see it.
It's weird. Sometimes we juxtapose young kids in college recruits as NFL draft picks, and NFL draft picks are in large. I mean, there's always improvement that happens, but they're more in large, closer to their ceiling. They are kind of what they are at that point for the most part. Rookies or young college players, I mean, we forget a lot of times that these kids are 17, 18, 19-year-old kids, right? Where they're just, I mean, at that age, a lot of kids don't even understand how their body works yet, at least from a functional movement perspective. Like they're still working on the dynamics of just movement. I mean, the kinetics of it. So I really think that for me, it was about missed time, missed development, and lack of development in a lot of terms. And I think there's a lot of people behind those miscues. Obviously, injuries are a freak thing that are unfortunate, and you can't take back the fact that Tyler did miss a lot of time, both before his Notre Dame career and during his Notre Dame career. I mean, he missed a sophomore year after 2.5 games where that was going to be his year of full development. And who knows what happens if he never gets hurt and maybe he takes the next step and he, becomes that type of quarterback. But unfortunately, he was lost to that. And then he goes to Alabama, where there was a weird log jam at quarterback, and eventually they ended up obviously with Jalen Milroe, who Milroe got better increasingly down the stretch of the season. So just a very unfortunate circumstance of lack of development. And some of it was, Tyler's undoings. A lot of it wasn't Tyler's undoing. I mean, injuries are freak things. The COVID year is a freak thing that is out of his control, obviously. So just missed opportunities and missed development, unfortunately, for Tyler for a variety of reasons.
Yep. All right, let's get to some more.
Irish Blooded says, yep, Irish Blooded. Why do they want Bill O'Brien at Ohio State? If Brian Hartline was the next coming of Riley and Kingsbury. Well,
I mean, who's saying that? I haven't heard anyone say that.
I think that there's been this big mystique over Brian Hartline over the last couple of years, because here's the distinction that I think we need to understand is that Brian Hartline is an excellent wide receiver coach. The proof is in the pudding. First rounder after first rounder. He's also a really good recruiter, obviously, getting talents like Jackson Smith-Njigba and Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave and getting Marvin Harrison Jr. and getting Carnell Tate and getting Brandon Ennis. Obviously, great recruiter. Obviously, a very good developer of talents. I mean, the proof is out there. Technically, those kids are very good for the most part, right? So he's a great wide receiver coach. No one had any idea what he was as an offense coordinator. He's never called offense before. No one. And I mean, and Irish Blood, I feel like this is
probably still hasn't called an offense. By the way,
and I feel like this is a little bit of a sarcastic jab, obviously, but at the end of the day, Brian Hartline just might not be an offensive coordinator. We have no idea. Maybe he will be, maybe he won't end up being, but right now, Bill O'Brien is a much more known commodity as a play caller than what Brian Hartline is. I mean, we know. I push back on a few of the things about Bill O'Brien. Do I think it's a clunky fit? Yes. Do I think that it's a matching of egos that could tear the program down potentially? Yes. But I do know is I mean, what I believe is that I do believe that actually Bill O'Brien's a better play caller than Ryan Day. I think Ryan Day is a very overrated play caller. I think what we saw this offseason, what I think was needed was one, they obviously wanted to get an offensive coordinator in there because Ryan Day needs to do more on the day-to-day CEO part of being a head football coach at Ohio State. Now, I think that this frees him up some time. I think Bill
Yeah.
O'Brien will at least have a better offense than what they had last year, because last year was not nearly good enough offensively.
Mhm.
Will it be a great hire? Probably not. Will it be at
No.
least a little bit of an improvement for what we saw in 2022? 2023? I believe that. I do believe that part.
So let me share some things. Number one, Ryan, there's this pushback now against Brian Hartline that, well, he's really not a good receivers coach because he just gets really good players. And I'm like, yes, that's true. That's part of being a good receivers coach is the acquisition of talent, number one. But number two, Ryan, you see this when you watch NFL draft film. Yes, you can look at a guy who's really talented and say he's just really talented. He's got to learn how to play the game. Part of the reason NFL teams covet Brian Hartline's receivers and why so many of his receivers have gone to the NFL and produced like immediately is because of the preparation and the coaching that they're receiving. There's lots of very talented receivers that need a year or two to get to the NFL and develop and be ready to play because there's such a big transition from how they were developed in college. And you see this with like air raid receivers all the time. We've seen this with like TCU guys. We've seen this with like some USC where they kind of need some time to develop, right? Because of the system that they're coming from. But a lot of Brian Hartline's guys are going to the NFL and they're ready to go now. And it's not because they're just because they're great. Like Garrett Wilson, for example, Chris Olave, they're not DK Metcalf. Who, by the way, I was completely wrong on. I thought DK Metcalf was not going to be a good NFL player because I thought he was a terrible route runner, had really stiff hips, but he's been pretty good. But he's not that. He's not like – they're not like A.J. Brown where this is big, thick, physical, freaky kind of guy. They're not like what Mike Evans was early in his career. They're not those kind of guys. These are 6 foot tall, darn good athletes, but they know how to play the game, right? Like that's the thing. They're not like Tyreek Hill where they're 4.2s, right? These are guys that know how to play. And that's why they're able to go. I mean, who was the top two? Again, not really an NFL guy, but wasn't like Wilson and Olave considered like arguably the top 2 rookie receivers last year in the NFL? Like they were in that both in that conversation at least.
They both went over 1,000 yards as a rookie last year. So
that's because they were prepared to play the game in college. And it's not just scheme, it's because of how they were played. Number one. Number two, I tend to agree with you on Bill O'Brien versus Ryan Day. I think Ryan Day has had by far the most talented team in the Big Ten, by far.
Yes.
And if you look at it, the further and further away they get from Urban Meyer's tenure, the worse they've become as a program. That's not debatable. The worse they've become on offense, the worse that they've just become from a toughness standpoint, from winning big game standpoint. I mean, what's their record against Michigan since he left, since Urban Meyer left, right? It's 1-3, right?
Yep.
So, to me, I look at it, and I say, yes, Ryan Day's a good a very good offensive mind when it comes to some certain like concepts. But there's a big difference between having some good concepts and being a good play designer and play caller. And we've seen some issues with him in that regard. And I think Bill O'Brien's a good offensive coordinator. I think he's very overrated, however. I don't think he is what people think he is, in my opinion. I think he gets way too much credit for what happened at Penn State. And I think he did a nice job at Bama, but he was hated by his players at Bama. They didn't want to play for him. And I think last year they wasted so much talent. He's a prick, and I've met Bill O'Brien. I've worked camps with Bill O'Brien. He is a first-rate jerk. And I don't know how that's going to fly in Ohio State. I really don't. I mean, Ryan, it's bad enough your head coach is a jerk. Now you've got to deal with this offense coordinator who's like Ryan Day on steroids when it comes to just being a prick to everyone. And I just don't know how that's going to be because, Ryan, you know this, man. Everybody talks about culture in a locker room, and that's important. But you need a pretty healthy culture in the coaching staff too. And I don't know how that. I'm like thinking of like Tony Alford and Brian Hartline and Justin Fry trying to deal with this guy, and like, no, you're not going to talk to me like that, buddy. I don't think so. So, I think it was a panic move, to be completely honest with you. I think there was a need to go bring in an offensive coordinator, and I don't know who are the other legitimate options. We heard about Dan Mullen and Jason Candle and all those kind of guys, and I'm like, if you chose Bill O'Brien over those guys, that's a mistake, in my opinion. That's a big mistake. But
it's going to be a very interesting season for Ohio State because I'm not even talking about the play calling and the play on the field. They're bringing a lot more transfers, a lot of transfers, high money transfers as well. And they bring in an offensive coordinator who I think is good at calling an offense, but he also alienates everyone he's ever around. I mean, that's just kind of so there's a lot of new faces in that room, and there's a big ego that just walked into
Yeah.
that room as well. So we'll see how that all meshes. I don't know. It could be really good
And
or it could be not great. We'll see.
the offseason they're having, Ryan, is raising the bar. I mean, with all the
Yep.
5 stars they've signed, and again, I think Julian
Yep.
Saint's overrated. I think he's a good quarterback. I think he's a top 100 guy, but he's not like this top 10 5-star that they've made him out to be. I think he's better than Aaron Noland, and
Yep.
but it's like he's not going to like the perception of who he is going to be greater than what he'll be. And
Yep.
Quinshon Judkins and that you've raised the expectations of who you're going to be, and I don't think they're going to meet him because you said it in a tweet yesterday, Ryan. Ohio State's still going to be soft. Why? Because Ryan Day is soft. That's what it boils down to. And as long as he's there until he changes who he is, it's going to continue to be a problem.
And I think one thing I wanted to clarify was I said they're bringing a lot of transfers. I'm talking about big money transfers. We know that money could change people, man. I'm not saying it's Will Howard's going to be an issue or anybody's going to be an issue, but I mean, you're bringing it like people. You're bringing in Quinshon Judkins, for instance, right? We know that they had to break the bank to get Quinshon there. Is he going to be okay with sharing the ball with Travion? I mean, maybe he thinks he's going to be okay with sharing the ball with Travion until he gets into that room and he actually has to share the ball with Travion. Things can change, man.
Right.
And egos can get in the way of things sometimes. I'm not saying it's going to happen. There's a chance that Ohio State is very good next year and maybe national championship.
Ryan.
It's
right.
I mean, it's
you can't ignore
the
the concern, right? You can't ignore that concern. And
because
you can't ignore the fact. Go ahead.
Yeah. It's a chain effect, right? As far as Quinshon, and again, this is hypothetical. Quinshon upset he's not getting more touches. Goes to Bill O'Brien, coach, I think I should be getting more touches. Bill O'Brien, being the prick we know that he is, get the F out of here. Go sit down. I'm not dealing with this stupid stuff. And then that alienates to now he's complaining to teammates, he's complaining to outside entities, he's complaining to everybody. Like that stuff happens, man. We would be very irresponsible to say that stuff never happens. It does. Will it happen in Ohio State? No idea. Yeah. But anytime you bring in guys with money in their pockets and ego in their minds, there's always that possibility. It's always possible. Maybe it'll mesh. We'll see though. Maybe.
Right. I want to push back on this. Look, Archer, I know you're a Ohio State fan, but you've got to be more honest about your head coach. Okay. Says Corey, Ryan Day has the second best win percentage against ranked opponents among active coaches. Okay. Are we like number one? I mean, who are those wins against? Number 23, Maryland, right? A very overrated Penn State team. Here's what I know. Since Ryan Day was named head coach, they're 1-4 they're 2-4 in the postseason. Right. So 19, they went 0-1. 20, they beat Clemson, got blown out by Alabama. In 2020, they beat Washington in the Rose Bowl. In 2021, trying to think, hold on. 2021 is when they lost Washington in the Rose Bowl. 2022, they lost to Georgia, and then this year they lost to Missouri. And you give me all the excuses. They almost did this, they almost did that, all this. But the fact is Ryan Day just doesn't win those games, and Michigan has absolutely dominated them. So you can hang on to the wins over Maryland and Iowa and Purdue if they were ranked. I mean, you can hang on to those, but it's kind of like what our beef was with Brian Kelly and what Marcus Freeman needs to prove is you don't get credit at Ohio State for beating those teams, right? Like Brian Kelly and Marcus Freeman this year shouldn't get credit for what he beat NC State. They beat so-and-so last year. No, you're supposed to beat Ohio State. You're supposed to beat Clemson. Those are the teams that you're supposed to beat, right? Don't care that you beat South Carolina in the Rose Bowl or in a Gator Bowl because you lost to Ohio State. That's how it should be. And so I would encourage Ohio State fans to not fall into the trap that Notre Dame fans fell into forever with Brian Kelly, which is look for these things to defend him on when in reality you're not paid to beat up on all those crap teams and say that you have the second best ranked. He's 1-3 against Michigan. He's 2-4 in the postseason. My man, I don't care about anything else, nor should you, right? The fact is, if he doesn't change that, then all the other stuff, all the wins over Iowa and Wisconsin and Maryland when they're ranked, none of that should matter. None of that should matter. Right? It's those other games that should matter. And he's not getting it done. Just like Brian Kelly hasn't gotten it done. And just like Marcus Freeman hasn't gotten it done yet in that regard. You got to be honest about that. And this whole second best win Urban Meyer's not coaching anymore. Nick Saban is retired. Dabo Swinney had a bad record early in his career. Go look at what Dabo's record is against ranked opponents in the last 6, 7, 8 years. I mean, that's a spin job right there, my man. And I would encourage you not to fall into that trap, because that's what Notre Dame fans did for years with Brian Kelly. Right? Well, look at win percentage and all. No, that doesn't matter. That's not what you're paid to do when you're at Notre Dame and when you're at Ohio State. It's just not. So you need to be able to look in the mirror and say what he's doing isn't good enough. Now, maybe the moves he's made this offseason, Ryan, are going to get it done. We'll see.
It's possible.
We'll see.
Hey,
they took some
swings. At the end of the day, I think they will have upgraded the quarterback position just for the near future, just going forward. I think Will Howard is a little bit better than McCord, Kyle McCord, personally. I do think that you have Julian Sain in the room now. You have Aaron Nolan coming in the room. Like, there's some talent in that quarterback room. I think that Caleb Downs is an absolute stud. I think he's an absolute monster, right? So you got some guys in there. There's no doubt, but
And Ryan,
you mentioned panic move, though. You mentioned a panic move with Bill O'Brien. I think there's a couple panic moves in these transfer portal additions. Personally, that's just me, though. We'll see.
Agree. If Quinshawn has the right attitude this year and he's willing to be 1A, 1B with Travion, then you've got a dynamic 1-2 punch at running back. And if Quinshawn is bought in and Travion is bought in, and I have to think Travion's bought in because he could have left.
Sure,
Travion had a window to go to the draft, so I think Travion's bought in. This takes a lot of the pressure off of Travion, too. He doesn't have to carry the ball 18, 20 times a game. You can have Quinshawn be sort of the power guy, and you can be the home run hitter. You could do some things like that. So, I think you mentioned quarterback. Even if you view Will Howard and Kyle McCord as a wash, right? And, some people like McCord maybe a little better. I think Will Howard's legs give him the edge because they're similar passers to me, but Will Howard's a little bit better athlete. But it's kind of the same guy, different style. But Julian Sain, to me, even though I've always felt he's overrated as a top 10 guy, that's a good football player. That's a top 100 quarterback that I think is better than Aaron Nolan. I think he's better than Devin Brown. And I think he's better than the kid they got from like Idaho or wherever last year. South Dakota. So to your point, Ryan, South Dakota, those two additions did make the quarterback room better, present and future. And there's no doubt about it. And I don't think Julian Sain is like jumping in the portal to get a payday. That's not. I think he jumped in the portal because I could go to Tuscaloosa to play for anybody else. I went there to play for this guy, and then Kalen DeBoer goes out and brings in his quarterback from Washington, who's Austin a pretty good player. Yeah. Yep. And I think it's like, hey, this system doesn't fit me. Now, my question with him is still the same question I have with Will Howard: is how do they fit that system? And how will Bill O'Brien be able to use them? He's kind of had mostly, in college anyway, mostly just kind of drop back quarterbacks, a little bit with Bryce Young last year. But Julian Sain's a bit of a gunslinger. Will he allow him to play like a gunslinger? We'll find out. But there's no doubt they added talent. And to your point, Caleb Downs is a stud. I mean, him and Lathan Ransom back there at safety is going to be, with Denzel Burke coming back. Like we talked the other day, before all the Caleb Downs stuff, and before Denzel Burke announced, I think Notre Dame's got a shot to have the best secondary in college football next year. Here's some teams that are competing with them. Ohio State flat out, right to me right now jumps into the mix as maybe having the best. I would say they even have a better secondary coming back, because even if you say that Xavier Watts is every bit as good as Caleb Downs, Lathan Ransom's better than what we know that Notre Dame has right now. Right? Some guys got to prove themselves. And you could say maybe Benjamin Morrison's a little bit better there. It's going to be up to the young Notre Dame corners and Rod Hurd and a Don Schuler to really step in and say, hey, we're better. But Ohio State, to me, maybe slightly ahead of where Notre Dame is right now. Like, that's a really good secondary now with Caleb Downs, because I think also Caleb Downs fits what Jim Knowles wants to do defensively too. And that's important. You got to be able to fit the system. And I think he fits that system pretty well. But honestly, I should take that back, because Caleb Downs can fit into any system. I mean, he's that kind of player, in my opinion. He can do whatever he wants.
He can play any spot he wants to.
Yeah, he really can. He really can.
He can play offense if he felt like it.
Yeah, I mean, he really can. That's one of the reasons I love Dallas Golden so much. I'm like, that kid could do whatever the heck he wants.
Apparently, I don't know if this is out there yet, but apparently Sonny Styles might be moving inside the linebacker full time. There's some talk about that one. So,
and that was going to be inevitable, in my opinion. He was never. I mean, even watching this year, like, that kid is not space player. Here's a
Yep.
fun one I want to jump down here, Ryan, to get a bit of a fun one here.
Joseph Barrett says, Brian, in your opinion, which team was better, 1988 Miami or 1993 Florida State?
I think it's 88 Miami. I mean, 93 Florida State was pretty good, but 88 Miami was phenomenal. I mean, I think 88 Notre Dame was better than 93 Notre Dame. And 88 Notre Dame needed every single second to beat that 88 Miami team. They manhandled Florida State in 93. I think that 88 Miami team was outstanding. And if you go back and look at that 1988 Miami team, Ryan, people forget like that team had to play some really good football teams that year. I mean, obviously they played Notre Dame on the road. That year they played Florida State in the opener. Florida State was preseason number 1, and Florida State finished that year 11-1. In 1988, only had one loss all year. It was a 31-0 loss to Miami. They went on the road next week, had that great comeback against Michigan. They beat Wisconsin, who at the time was pretty terrible. They went on the road, beat number 11 LSU that year, 44-3. They beat number 8 Arkansas that year, 18-16. They beat BYU 41-17, and then in the Orange Bowl, they beat number 6 Nebraska 23-3. So that 88 Miami team and that BYU team that they beat 41-17, Ryan, that was a 9-4 BYU team. That was a really good BYU team. So that was a great, great team. 93 Florida State was good, but yeah, 88 Notre Dame or 88 Miami was better, in my opinion. Do you have a take on this, Ryan, or is this a little bit before your time?
Never saw him play. If we want to talk about 2001 Miami, I got some conversation. But
yes,
yeah,
that's a no-brainer.
Not as much.
That's a no-brainer. No-brainer. Got a super chat from Will Falk. Thanks, Will.
Will says, and thank you so much, Will. Can we breathe a sigh of relief yet about Al Golden and Mike Mickens returning for the 2024 season? Thanks for all you do, Ryan and Brian. You're welcome.
Well, there hasn't been anything credible about Mike Mickens returning. We talked about this last week. Some random site that covers Cincinnati said he should be a candidate. And then a Notre Dame site, I won't say who it was, who also put some other false stories out there this year that were completely BS, then ran with it and were like, Mike Mickens could leave. And I'm like, this people want, what's an example of clickbait? That was one of the most clickbaity things I've ever seen in my life. It was ridiculous. And what was funny is I reached out to a source very close to the situation and said, hey, Cincinnati reached out and they haven't even reached out yet. Or say, hey, any chance you're leaving for Mickens is going to leave for Cincinnati? And the answer is like, they haven't even reached out to him. So,
nice.
There had already been an article written that he might leave for Cincinnati, but they hadn't even. Now, could that change down the road? Sure, it could change. But, there hasn't been anything else about him. And my understanding is he's planning on staying. Al Golden, look, when you can breathe a sigh of relief with Al Golden is when Al Golden either A, says, I'm not going anywhere, or B, when all the NFL DC jobs are filled. That's when you can breathe a sigh of relief with Al Golden. Until then, it is what it is. Now, to me, I don't want to. I mean, I think Al Golden did some excellent things this year. I don't want to see him leave. I want to see continuity for next year. But at the same time, you got to understand who the head coach is. Head coach is Marcus Freeman, right? The defense is going to be fine. If Al Golden leaves, he's going to put somebody else in place to be able to do it. That's the reality of it. And so, I can say two things can be true at once, right? I don't want Al Golden to leave. Did a great job this year. That's true. But also is true as if he does leave, I have a lot of confidence that Marcus Freeman's going to fill that void quite nicely. That's how I feel about it, Ryan. So that's my sigh of relief. My sigh of relief is Marcus Freeman.
We'll come over the bridge as we get there. I'd say I think we would know about Mickens sooner than Golden as far as like if anything's going to change in that capacity. Because I mean, we're just starting the hiring cycle in the NFL side of things. I mean, we'll be running up into that until the combine and conversations that happen there, and then it's shortly after that. So I mean, there's a little bit of a window here for NFL jobs to be open. So
Ryan, how many head coaching jobs are open right now? Do you know off the top of your head?
I have no idea. I'm not
in the
sure.
NFL? But only one has been filled so far, right? And that's the Raiders. Yeah. They're the only one that have filled the job so far. And then there's
that was an interim situation, obviously. So I mean,
and he had a chance
like the Atlanta Falcons, Chargers. I'm trying to think who else has jobs open, but I mean, there's like some second interviews that are starting to happen now. I think Atlanta Falcons just brought in like Bill
Right.
Belichick for a second interview, Jim Harbaugh for a second
So
interview. So yeah.
so it's the Patriots, right? They have a job
Yep.
open. The
Yep.
Titans have a job
Well, no,
open.
the Patriots have their head coach now. They
They ju
hired
That's right, Mayo,
Jared
Jared Mayo.
Mayo. Jared Mayo. Yep.
So you've got the Titans job is still open, right? The
Yes.
Chargers job is still open.
Yes.
The Commanders job is still open, right? Correct? Washington
I
Commanders?
believe so. Yep. Yep.
Okay, and then the Bears did not fire their head coach. Panthers, is that still open?
Panthers is still open. Yep.
Falcons is still open, right? You just
Falcons is still
said.
open.
And
Yep.
then the Seahawks, did they replace Pete Carroll yet?
Seahawks have not replaced Pete Carroll yet.
Okay,
Nope.
so that's six head coaching jobs right there. And then again, all that movement, like let's say, like there's talk that the Eagles are going to hire a new D coordinator. There's also
Yes.
that type of movement. So let's say they get a D coordinator from somewhere else, and that opens up an opportunity. You know what I mean? Like that, all those things are part of it. So yeah, I mean, to me, I'm just sitting back, and whatever's going to happen is going to happen. I have no control over it, but I just have this faith in Marcus Freeman that whoever fills that job, if he does leave, and I'm not saying I want him to, but if he does, I just have faith that that Marcus Freeman's going to fill it, and whether it's internal or external, that's one thing I'm not worried about. Ryan I'm more concerned about losing Mike Mickens than I am Al Golden as the D coordinator, if that makes sense. Just because for a host of reasons, in my opinion. So good question. I'm going to ask this one, Ryan, because this is a recruiting question. This is from Coach Koch. Thank you, Coach. Where do you think stand with Brett Clatterball? I believe Brett Clatterball released a top 5 or 6 recently, and Notre Dame was in it. Got to see him play live this season, and he was excellent. I'd love for him to go to Notre Dame. # Virginia football.
Yeah, well, Coach, so Brian already alluded to it. He did release a top 5 a couple weeks ago. Notre Dame was included in it. I know Notre Dame also was, and I think you're on the message board, Coach Koch, but if you're not, I put the Coaches on the Road segment where they were down in Virginia. Al Golden visited his high school down there in the state of Virginia. So, I mean, there's interest there. I would say that for linebacker recruiting, it's going to be very interesting because there's a lot of names that I'd say Notre Dame's in a good spot with early on. I mean, they already have a commitment from Josiah Key out there in Hawaii. They technically have another one from Dominic Hulak, but he's kind of considered a little bit of a hybrid player. So his number can kind of be flexible a little bit as far as like the number you're going to take. But I mean, it's a deep board of linebackers I think are pretty interested in Notre Dame. You know, the names like Marco Jones and Christian Jones and Noah McHale and Anthony Sacca. There's a few guys that I would say Notre Dame has a legit chance with, or at least in a okay or solid position right now. So whether Brett ends up with the class or not, I would just say we just need a little bit more clarity as far as like how hard they're going to push for a couple different guys, because this is what they've done the last 2 years now, Brian, is that they have a really big linebacker board. Like it's huge, man. And there's a lot of interest. But what is it ultimately going to look like? I mean, at this point, it's almost a guessing game as far as like what's a 3-man linebacker class look like potentially? What's a 4-man linebacker class look like potentially? It could be a couple of different things. Like it could be a few different combinations. So just wait and see a little bit. But obviously, Brett clearly likes Notre Dame a decent bit, or else wouldn't be in the top 5 to start with there. So
yeah. I want to address this thing too from Brandon. He says, "What's Golden's recruiting like, though?" I get where you're coming from, Brandon, and he needs to step up his recruiting a little bit. But at the same time, you have to think about the fact that look, there's a reason Notre Dame has recruited linebackers so well while he's been here, because you have Marcus Freeman, you have Chad Bowden, and Max Bulla. From what I've been told, and Ryan, you've talked to different linebackers. He's been very involved in this process as well with these kids, and that's helped as also. But look, linebacker recruiting at Notre Dame is going to be pretty good over a course of time as long as Marcus Freeman's the head coach. And the best thing that Al Golden can do is go put out a top 5 defense on the field. And to me, that's exactly what he did this year. I mean, the product sells itself. Like if anyone that knows Mike Mickens will know, he is not a good recruiter because he has this like outgoing personality and he plays the games and he knows how to schmoo. No, it's because he's a very honest, direct, open guy that kids feel he cares about him. But he's just not like what you think of great recruiter that's in his 30s. But it's the product on the field, Ryan. Why is Notre Dame on the verge of potentially landing its best corner class in decades? It's not because Mike Mickens has this Marcus Freeman-like personality, cult of personality, right? It's because he can sit there and say, this is the best recruiting pitch ever. It's boom, here's my resume. That's what you can do. And he's an honest, genuine guy. That's why certain kids want to play for him. But there's also a reason why the quote unquote studs, right, don't want to play for him, because he doesn't kiss butt, right? It's the proof is in the pudding. That's why linebacker signed up to play for Notre Dame this year. It's because of Marcus Freeman and the track record. And so, yes, it'd be nice if Al Golden did more recruiting. But what I think Notre Dame has done a pretty good job of is finding his niche, right? He's not going to be a guy that's just calling 18-year-olds all the time. He's just not, right? So what is the niche? Have Freeman do that. Have Chad do that. Have Max Bulla do that. But when these kids get on campus and when they go in home, that's when Al Golden does this thing. He's almost kind of like a head coach, where like they kind of bring him into close and he has that meeting where he sits down with you in the, when you're on visit. Who was the guy you did the interview with yesterday? Was it Dallas Golden? There's a couple guys that you interviewed and you have stories at irishbreakdown.com, right? Where they talked about like sitting down with Al Golden and having him show me. I think Ethan Long might have been one too. And having him talk about, show me how I fit into the system, man, that was great. And so that's how they're using him. So that's smart. That's smart coaching. It'd be nice if he was doing it was more of a grinder on the trail, but it's like, dude, put a great product on the field and then be our closer, and that's what they've done. So it doesn't worry me as much as it did when he first got on, to be honest with you. I'd like it to be better, but I think they've made it work.
Yeah. I still think it is better than it once was, though, right? Like there was a time there where you're just like, every linebacker I talked to like barely had any conversation with Al Golden. Like you hear his name now, a lot more prevalent than you did. Would you like it to be a little bit more? Sure, but I would also say this, Brandon. There's also some recruits that like I don't even think Notre Dame would have. There was just a question about Brett Clatterball. You don't think Al Golden's ties to Virginia have been a big help with Brett Clatterball, for instance? Here's another one. Anthony Sacca, I don't think would even be a possibility for Notre Dame right now, nearly as much if Al Golden wasn't the main recruiter there because of personal relationships and then his time, not even just his time with his dad at Penn State. Like Al Golden has frequented the Northeast a lot in his career as a recruiter in general. So again, could it be better in certain instances? Absolutely. But are there a lot of variables that still make him a asset on the recruiting trail? Yes, I believe that there are still a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Good questions. All right. Here's Tyler Evans.
Tyler says, most overrated. Thank you so much for the question, Tyler. Most overrated head coach you have ever seen.
Ever?
On the college level? Or are we talking about NFL?
Let's go college. Let's say college.
Okay.
Oh, man. Most overrated ever? Man, I don't know if I could say ever. I'd have to.
And NFL-wise, Ron Rivera popped into my head. Ron Rivera is the most overrated head coach.
Yeah, how does he keep getting jobs?
9 of 12 seasons were losing seasons for him, and he's still revered as this really good head coach. I don't understand.
And you're going to love this, Ryan. He's interviewing for the Eagles job, D coordinator job. Mm-hmm.
A little better than head coaching job, at least, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, I say current football, it's James Franklin in the current era. Overrated all time. I'd have to really think about that one, man. I'd have to really think about that one. Man.
Ryan Day. Ryan Day. Is,
yeah. No, Ryan Day might actually be more overrated than James Franklin.
Yeah.
But at least he's been to the playoff a bunch of times and won a playoff game. I mean, I got to give him that. He did beat Clemson. Smack Clemson.
Someone said Jimbo in the chat. That would be an interesting.
Yeah, Jimbo's in that conversation. Yeah, I mean, Jimbo, there's this aura about him. And how about Ohio State hiring the guy that gave Jimbo that monster contract? How about that?
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
Same guy that was the head coach at was it Ole Miss when all those issues happened with Hugh Freeze? That was a weird fit by Ohio State. Very strange. Somebody just texted me, said John L. Smith. I never thought John L. Smith was considered a great
Michigan
coach.
State, John L. Smith?
Because he was at Louisville and Michigan State, but I don't remember him being considered like a really good coach. Boy, I'm trying to think. This is a good question. No, I mean, most overrated coach.
Scott Frost was a pretty overrated coach.
Yeah, I mean, I think Lincoln Riley's a bit of an overrated coach. I think he's a bit of an overrated head coach. I think Lincoln Riley,
Yeah.
the difference between Lincoln Riley and Ryan Day is, I've said this before, is I think Lincoln Riley actually is a really good offensive mind.
Yeah.
I think Ryan Day is a little overrated there. I just don't think Lincoln Riley's a great head coach.
Yeah. Definitely not the most overrated though. Like most
No,
overrated. There's got to be guys
no.
more in that.
Yeah.
No.
I
I got one. I got one. How about a guy failing up? All right. A guy failing up. Cliff Kingsbury.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Somehow got fired at Texas Tech and failed his way
With a
up to an
losing
NFL
record.
head coaching job. Like, all right.
Guy had a losing record with Pat Mahomes as his quarterback and got an NFL head coaching job. And people were shocked that it didn't work out. Just ridiculous. Oh, man. I'm going to have to think about this one, Tyler, because that's a really good question. I think Les Miles is one. I think Les Miles is but it's hard to say that because the guy's got what, 2 national titles or one national title, right? Sorry.
Ed Orgeron was pretty overrated as a head coach too. Really good position coach, but as a head coach, nah.
Yeah, I have to think about this one. That's a really good question. I always thought Rick Neuheisel was a bit of an overrated head coach. He was decent, but I always thought he was a little bit of a Gary Barnett, very overrated head coach. In my opinion, that's one that I would go with. But of all time, I'm just giving you names that pop into my head. Oh my goodness!
Oh, how about
my buddy will swear right here. My friend Tony will tell you until he's blue in the face that Bo Schembechler is the most overrated coach of all time. He'll say all those years he had a terrible Rose Bowl record and he never won a national title. That's a good point. It's a good point.
Who was the coach at Texas A&M when Kingsbury was there, the head coach? That's my answer too.
When Kingsbury was the OC,
with Manziel.
You're talking about oh gosh, what's his name? Kevin Sumlin. Kevin Sumlin
would be another one that I think was pretty overrated. Kevin Sumlin, Charlie Strong was another that I think was pretty overrated. Yeah. Oh, how about Tom Herman? Can I throw Tom Herman in the conversation as well?
Yeah,
that's big one.
Yeah, he's a good one. That's a good one. I personally, just so people know, I don't think Bo Schembechler was overrated. I mean, championship, yeah, but to me, there's something to say about consistency over decades. Sure. And yeah, he never won a title, but they were always good. I mean, Bo's teams are always really good. And to me, I mean, no one's ever said he's like the greatest coach of all time. So that would be where I would, no one that's not a Michigan fan has ever said that. But I mean, if you look at it, Ryan, from 1969, his first year at Michigan, to 1980, it's 12 seasons. They finished outside the top 10 once.
Yeah.
And that's pretty good. That's pretty good. Yes, I know he had a significantly losing record in the Rose Bowl, but still, there's something to be said for consistency. And Bo was consistent for a long time. He's a Hall of Famer. But I've never heard anyone say he's top 5 coach all time. So no, that's not one that I would necessarily go. I'd have to think about this one and figure out why the answer is Brian Kelly. So let's go to the next one. Here's a good one, Ryan.
From PQ, what it do? What's up? Thank you so much. What did Al Golden and the defense do differently in the red zone that made them go from one of the worst to one of the best red zone defenses in the country?
Couple things that I will just say off the top of my head. I felt they were more aggressive with their coverage strategy last season. I felt they did too much off coverage in the red zone in the past. Would allow guys to kind of get free releases. You think of the touchdown Benjamin Morrison gave up against Syracuse 2 years ago, Ryan, happened right in front of us. Just playing off coverage, guy leaned him out, beat him inside. Like there were things like that happened. The second thing is I felt like they were better against the run. I think having a better D line, they could pressure in the red zone better with the front four, and they could stop the run more effectively in the red zone. That was a big one for me because, how many times in the year before, Ryan, did they get to fourth down in the red zone and give up a touchdown? At least 4 times that I can think of where they gave up 4th down because they allowed teams to get inside the 5 and then go for it. What they did this year is once they got into the red zone, they just shut you down because you couldn't throw the ball on them in the red zone. Like you had no chance of throwing the ball on Notre Dame in the red zone when they played their defense. And I felt like you just had a better defensive line that with a reduced field, you just really had nothing you could do to them. You couldn't take the safeties out of the game. They could just lock you down on the outside with their corners and put 9 guys in the box. That's really what it comes down to is in the red zone, you could essentially get 8 to 9 guys in the box. depending on how you lined up. And you had no chance on the outside. Like, didn't matter if it was Marvin Harrison, whoever it was, you were not beating their corners on the outside in the red zone. And I think Benjamin Morrison gave up 3 touchdowns this year. I think they were all on broken plays, if I remember correctly. They were all on like scramble broken plays. That's the best chance you had to score on them this year, was on something like that. So those are the things, just kind of big picture, that to me I thought worked. And I also felt too, Ryan, just not that they blitzed more or less in the red zone. I just thought overall this year their blitzing was just more effective. I think that factored in too to why they were better. What are your thoughts, Ryan? Anything else that you'd add to that?
I think the middle of the field was just a lot stronger this year overall. I mean, I would say Howard Cross and Riley Mills deserve a lot of credit for there. The defensive line rotation just in general deserves. I mean, even guys like Nana Osafo-Mensah were impactful in the run game as good rotational pieces. I mean, you had a bunch of guys that I think just kind of you were able to stand taller in the middle of the field. I think you had a little bit more consistency in the inside at linebacker as well. And then you had a playmaker at safety, which I think never hurts your cause as well. So I think impactful middle of the field, I would say, is a big one. And then the other one that you hit on that I would agree with is that anytime you can be man-to-man heavy on the outside of corner and be really good there, it kind of funnels everything inside and makes less opportunities to create mismatches in a more condensed situation. So middle of the field, corners that can middle of the field impact and better cornerback play on the outside, more consistent cornerback play. I think together they help them to make that quick turnarounds.
Good stuff. Got another super chat down here, Ryan, from Aiden Banami.
Aiden says, and thank you so much, to Gap Closing. Thanks for all the work, fellas. You're welcome, sir. You're welcome.
Yeah. Ryan, I'll ask this one. It's a recruiting question. I'll ask this one. It's from Irish Blooded. I know it is early, but any feedback to share on Mike Brown and wide receiver targets from recruiting or junior day or off-season drills? Too early on the last one. They've only been back on campus for a week, so just focus on the recruiting part, right?
Yeah, well, I'll say this is that I'll have a more in-depth interview with Talon Taylor, but I would say a thing that I heard more consistently just for let's talk about his situation in general. The wide receiver recruiting in general, Irish Blooded, has been a little bit of a interesting thing to watch because I would say this is that Chancey Stuckey was a really good recruiter, right? Like there was no doubt about that. The board was in a pretty decent spot, but obviously with the shortcomings and the internal stuff, the switch had to be made. And anytime you take a good recruiter out of the picture, there's going to be some question marks, right? There's a little bit of that weird limbo, that little flux in between two coaches. And Mike Brown comes in, and I think that early on it was about, getting acclimated, make sure you're getting there, you're coaching in the bowl game, getting your guys leveled and ready to go, and the miscellaneous things on a day-to-day progression perspective, I think was kind of the priority. Well, now that we've had a little bit of time to really digest as far as what wide receiver recruiting is going to look like, Talon Taylor, I think, is a great example. Talon Taylor was not planning on coming this weekend to Notre Dame because, as I reported on the board, there was actually a wedding that was happening in the Taylor family. So they weren't planning on going anywhere. It was Mike Brown's persistence and his continued conversation was a big reason why Talon Taylor made the trip to Notre Dame this weekend. And by all accounts, and by my conversation briefly, the relationship really, I think, took a nice jump this weekend because he was a guy that had recruited Talon. Obviously, he was at Cincinnati, was at Wisconsin this past year, so they had a relationship because they were actively recruiting Talon Taylor. But I think just kind of getting him in that new setting, I think gave him an opportunity to sit down, talk to the coaches, understand where things are, understand where things are moving. So I think early, we're going to see what happens with wide receiver recruiting in its entirety. But I will say is that we've had pretty good early indications that I think Mike Brown is going to go in the right direction as a recruiter because of the things I said, making up for some lost time with some recruits that had good relationship with Coach Stuckey. We also talk about just putting his touches on the recruiting board as well. I mean, we've seen expansion over the last few days, obviously bringing some new wide receivers onto the board as well. But I think that the couple things that I think are positive is that he's making up for lost time with some of the guys that are still priorities. I mean, they went out to see Derek Meadows last week. They obviously got Talon Taylor to take the visit this past weekend as well. I think that he is a big relationship guy, which I think will go far way. And I think ultimately the biggest thing that will be a big sell is that on the field, I think it's going to take a nice step this year. I think that the wide receiver position are going to be better. I think they're going to be more positively well coached, which I think will help 2025 wide receiver recruiting and beyond as well, because they'll be able to see a better product on the field.
I got to say, Ryan, the players that he's offered has been interesting, because I don't think not a one of them is highly ranked that I know of. Maybe the Bright kid
the Pennsylvania kid's a top 200 kid by two different platforms.
Top 200?
Top 200.
Okay.
Top 200. Yeah. Yep.
And I think another has him as a 3-star.
Yeah.
But like Elijah Burris, I'd take that kid right now. Right? I mean, right now. I love that kid's film. And I know there's some debate on that from other people, but like for me, I love that kid's film. And then when I saw him on campus this weekend, he's at least as tall as Marcus Freeman. That was something that I liked as well. But like the Cyrus kid from PA, Ryan, that kid's got some ability. You know, Sean Terry's more of a niche player, but that niche is pretty good. You look at Raiden Vines Bright, that kid's got some really good film. They're getting so here's a little thing. Chancey Stuckey had kind of wasn't doing as much with Taylon Taylor and Dalen McCutcheon as I think he should have been towards the end of his tenure. And so there's some ground they've got to make up with those kids. And I think Mike Brown and Chad Bowden and the staff are doing it, but it's got to be at the end of the day, Chad Bowden and those guys can only take you so far. The position coach has got to be the one that ultimately gets it done. And so far, so good. So far, so good. Somebody said I'd take Sean Terry right now. I wouldn't. I'm just – Ryan, you and I are kind of the same page there. There's some things I like about him, but there's just too many guys on the board to me that are just better right now. And I think he's more of a niche guy than some other guys.
Yeah, I think the one good thing about wide receiver recruiting is that I think there's one thing that the staff is definitely targeting, and that's talking about Mike Brown. They want guys that can win in space, and they want a little bit of juice to the wide receiver position. I mean, every one of those wide receivers can run pretty well. I mean, for the most part, like Raiden Vines Bright can run pretty well. The kid from Pennsylvania is a 10-400 meter kid. Like that kid can fly.
And it shows up on film.
Kid, the Nasir Newkirk kid averaged 22 yards a catch last year for Dudley in North Carolina, is a basketball player, and I think he also runs track and runs pretty good track times as a 100-meter kid. That kid's 6'2", 185, and he can run. And also he's planning to try to take a visit sometime this offseason as well. So if nothing else, and Sean Terry, I question the long speed, but that kid is dynamite in space. Really quick kid, really quick twitch, can make guys miss. So they are trying to find, I think, unique, explosive athletes that can create some plays outside of just catch point dynamos, as guys that are pre-catch to catch points guys that can create a little bit more for themselves. So it's been interesting to follow, and I'm very, very intrigued to see how it goes moving forward.
Newkirk's the one guy I have not watched yet, Ryan. I have not had a chance to watch.
He's 6'2", 185, and it's just like a long stride. Like he's a basketball player. He's a really good basketball player. And he also, it's weird, Brian. Like a couple of the guys, like I'm just like, where's the production, right? Like I'm trying to find where the production is on film and just in general. Nasir Newkirk's not one of those. I mean, he had 51 catches for over 1,100 yards last year for Dudley. Like he had a nice, he had like 34 touchdowns in his career. I'm a little confused on that one. He's got the weirdest offer list in the world too. He's got a couple good Power 5 offers, but then he's got Notre Dame and Georgia. But he's unranked by everyone except he's a 3-star on one platform. I'm just like, what the heck is this? I'm so confused by this.
Yeah. It's like, well, like Burris the same way. It's like Notre Dame, Duke, and then nothing after that. It's just kind of wild.
It's weird. We had a question from Robert Matichek, who says, Coaches per, what's coming, going? Great shows as always. In comparing players per snap production, is quality of opponents faced applicable for general results volume ratios? Thanks.
Couple things. So in comparing players per snap production, I think that's very important. I think that's you have to look at context, because like Ryan, last week I was making a point about Riley Mills' production on a per snap basis compared to Howard Cross as a pass rusher. And how Riley played a lot less snaps in passing downs than Howard did. And just kind of comparing the numbers. And then, somebody else was making a comment about Howard Cross on the message board, not being a real good pass rusher and not being an elite player. And I pointed out, like, look, he doesn't have a lot of sacks, but he's got a lot of pressures and such. But then also pointing out that Howard was pretty good in the big moments this year. He was pretty good in the big game. I thought he was pretty good against Ohio State. I thought he was great against Duke. I thought he was very good against USC. There was a lot of games this year where I thought Howard had a pretty good game. in the bigger moments. So I do think that and this was always kind of my beef with Jerry Tillery in 2018. Jerry Tillery had 8 sacks. 4 of them came against Stanford. And like, okay, he had that like one big game against an okay offensive line, but he also kind of disappeared in a lot of big games, especially later in the season. So I think you always have to look at stat patterns. You always have to do that. You always have to look at guys that put up these big numbers against bad teams and then don't produce against good teams. Like I've pointed out with Chris Mitchell. If Chris Mitchell would have put up the same numbers he did, but had 2 catches for 9 yards against Arkansas, that would have been a red flag for me. Big red flag for me. But the best team he played against, well, let's just say the most talented team he played against, at least for SEC talent, he had 6 catches and 150 yards on the road against an SEC team. He played really well against Liberty, played very well against Jacksonville State. Those are the most athletic teams he faced against, and he had great performances in each situation. That matters to me. That matters a ton to me because, Ryan, you and I as Notre Dame fans have seen this all of our lives. All these guys have put up numbers, but then when they get into those big games, they don't do a whole lot. And so, yeah, I think quality of the opponent face is very applicable. I think anytime you're just making an argument on just pure numbers without any context, you're going to lose me a little bit. Like I want to see context. I want to see how you play I mean, that was the big knock on John Elway's whole career, right? Well, he didn't play well in Super Bowls. Well, I would always argue he always had the inferior opponent, but that's a valid argument. He didn't play well in Super Bowls. I thought he played pretty well against the Giants early on, and then his team just got overwhelmed. But I mean, it wasn't until his last game really that John Elway had that huge, great Super Bowl performance. That's one of my things about the Josh Allen versus Pat Mahomes debate. Like, look, man, here's the thing I love about Pat Mahomes. I love Josh Allen, but here's what I know about Pat Mahomes. When it's a big game, chances of him playing at his best are pretty high. When it's a big moment, the chances of him doing what he needs to do to win the game is pretty high. You know what I mean? Now, you could argue, well, this team's better than that team, and that's fair, but the fact is you still got to step up in those moments. I mean, that's part of the reason why Joe Montana is considered an all-time great, even though I think I would kind of push back against that for several reasons, but Joe Montana was always money when it mattered. That's the reality of it. He was money when it mattered. And I think those things have to be taken into account. Absolutely. Absolutely.
I have a friend named Parker Fleming who's Stats of War on Twitter, and he always does these. He always does these breakdowns of team by team, but also just team in each offseason where he breaks down quality of production coming back. And I think it's the most flawed thing in the world, not from his perspective, but people always talk about like production coming back. There's 76% of offensive production, yada, yada, yada. The thing I love, though, that Parker does is he goes deep into the weeds of his statistical breakdown of here's the production against various opponents and quality of opponents, their EPA against a certain team and all those different, stat points. And he gets deeper into this is quality production coming back. This is really this is more a player that does have that great production, but against the best teams on the schedule. And that's where kind of his numbers come from. So I think that the efficiency stuff is great. I think the per snap production stuff is great, but I agree that the reason that you guys listen to analysts and not computers is because you need somebody to be able to manipulate those numbers and gain a general understanding as far as like what numbers actually matter or what numbers do not matter. Because numbers in its rawest form do not lie, but people can manipulate them any way they want and then make them lie. So yes. Yeah. Numbers aren't the reason you listen to a podcast. Numbers aren't the reason that you look at a statistical breakdown. It's how people use those numbers that is the reason that you listen.
I just want to follow him on Twitter, Ryan. That sounds like a very interesting thing. I'm gonna have to look and see what he's
not a football guy, man, but he is a football guy in the sense that he does his work on football, but he is a analytics guy. He'll be completely upfront about that, but he dives deep into the weeds because he understands that, quality of production matters and quality.
I think analytics are a great thing if they're used correctly. They are the epitome of what you just said. The problem is there's so many people that use analytics without any understanding of what that actually means, right? And that's the problem. And we'll see. Here's a interesting or some big news today, obviously in the recruiting world, right?
John Leahy, thoughts on George McIntyre going to Tennessee? Yeah, just dropped. I think it was like 10:30 Eastern time was when he made his commitment. So. I mean, John, I would say this is down the stretch of that recruitment, or at least over the last couple months from what I've followed, it was especially after Deuce Knight obviously had picked Notre Dame, I kind of took a step back because we knew that, quarterback wasn't going to be on the docket for 2025 as much, but it was a Alabama-Tennessee thing. Obviously, George McIntyre is from Tennessee. He plays in the state of Tennessee, but Alabama was big in that conversation. I think that obviously the movement of head coaching and future of Alabama football obviously kind of derailed them a little bit in those types of situations, but they were always one of the main front runners. And I think that, honestly, like, hey, we have to see what Josh Heupel can build as far as offensive line consistently and defense and being that team from here on here up. But he's got to have a couple of really talented quarterbacks to deal with over the next few years, with Nico obviously playing a little bit down the stretch and having a full offseason now again, and having a guy like George McIntyre coming in. McIntyre is a stud talent. He's a big time dude, and Josh Heupel's a really good offensive coordinator. So I imagine he's going to be very good for Tennessee when he gets there.
Ryan, I love this pickup. I'm very high on George McIntyre, and I think he's got a lot of room to grow physically, like literally physically. But that was the biggest shock for me when I watched this. This is sophomore film of him. I haven't even seen his junior film. I'm just talking about sophomore film. But I was shocked at how big his arm was, because he is a string bean. He's 6'5" and a $105. It's ridiculous. Not really, but he's like a skinny kid. Then I'm watching him like run around. Like, this kid's a pretty athletic kid. And then you watch him throw the deep ball. You're like, dude, this kid's got an arm. And I thought he was Mike McIntyre's son. He's his nephew. So just so we're clear on that. But I think it's a great pickup. I think he's one of the 2 or 3 best quarterbacks in this class. And I like spreading out big time quarterbacks every other year more so than back to back, just because there's a greater chance that you can keep that guy on board. And I think if Nico's as good as Tennessee hopes he is, George comes in as a freshman, sits behind Nico, who will then be a 2-year starter, goes pro, and now George steps in. And that would be the ideal scenario. And I think he's a really good fit for what Josh Heupel likes to do, because he's mobile, but he's not a runner. You know what I mean? Like, he can move around, but he's exactly. And I think that fits what Heupel. I think it fits Heupel's offense. Heupel likes a guy that can run, but he doesn't need it. It's not like a mandatory. You have to have a running quarterback, but you have to have some mobility in that offense. You do. You can't be like you can't be a big armed, immobile guy because of how much empty they do. Because of the way that they set their protections, you have to, because of the amount of RPOs they do, you have to have a guy that's got pocket awareness and pocket mobility to thrive in that offense. That you have to have. You don't necessarily have to be a runner, but you have to have that. And I think George has that. I think he's a very good quarterback. I think it's a great pickup for Tennessee.
And he clearly has a type as a coach that he likes, right? Like, he clearly likes the tall, strong-armed guys that can move a little bit. Like, he clearly has a type. There's no doubt.
Yeah, absolutely. Very big pickup for them.
We had Jordan Pinero says, do you think Notre Dame actually? Yep. Sorry.
I was going to, no, you go ahead. I should have read that one because it's for you, but you can read it and answer it. Go ahead, Rye.
Do you think Notre Dame actually has a shot with Nathaniel Owusu-Boateng now that they got him on campus? If so, how much of a shot? Jordan, yes, I do. I had an interview at irishbreakdown.com. Look, this is the kind of the Nathaniel Owusu-Boateng thing. Everybody knows about his brother, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, and people hyper-focus on that. But you have to understand that family dynamics, and Nathaniel Owusu-Boateng had never been to Notre Dame before. Like, he didn't understand fully the pull of Notre Dame football. And, like, he understood it in the sense of, like, talk to his brother about it, right? But, like, we know, and I have an interview coming out with Brady Smigel, who is the quarterback out of California, who talked about this, that it's just a different feel when you get there, man. Like, you just can't, people tell you all about it, but then you finally get there and you're like, oh, this is what they're talking about. I get it now.
Right.
And I think that for me, like, Nathaniel, I think liked Notre Dame, at least the thought of Notre Dame, but until he got to campus, was never going to happen. It just wasn't. It wasn't a realistic option. Him making the trip, first and foremost, credit to the recruiting staff, credit to the coaching staff, being able to get him to come on campus, because this dude's legit, man. He's a top 20 player in the country by Rivals, number 19 overall. He is a legitimately stud football player. He's fantastic. Maybe the top linebacker in the country. Like, it's arguable. He has that type of profile to him. But regardless, he got there, and he's already saying things that you love to hear after a visit. Because there's sometimes, Brian, where people visit for the first time, and you're like, okay, cool, he liked it, but no, it's not going to go anywhere. but he's talking about, oh yeah, it feels like home a little bit, right? Oh, first thing he said to me was, I'm already looking forward to coming back. And I didn't ask him if he was coming back. He's already talking about trying to come back to Notre Dame. So yes, I think there's a chance. You still need to battle, man. You need to get him back for a second visit. If Notre Dame is able to get him back for a second visit, Jordan, I'll put it like this. If they're able to get him back for a second visit, I think they have a very good chance. I think it's legitimate. Right now, I think it's better than it was, no doubt about it. I think there's some realistic chance. If I'm saying right now, like, I don't know, 30, 40%, but like that's compared to like 10% that it probably was before the visit, or 0%. Like it just wasn't going to happen before the visit. Notre Dame is in the game. Now, Nathaniel is not in decision-making mode, though. Like, this thing's going to go on, folks. Like, it's going to go on. But Notre Dame at least had his attention before the visit, and now they have his full attention after the visit. He's a place that he can see himself. And I also love the video that he sent me, and I know it made it rounds on Twitter as well, of him just doing snow angels with no shirt underneath. And, like, that's the stuff you like to see, right? So I think Notre Dame has a chance there. They just need to continue that now. Keep building that momentum. Show a great product on the field, and we'll see. They have a much better chance than they did beforehand. There's no doubt about that.
Couple things about this one, Ryan. You know, I've been doing this a long time, and there's certain things you look for when a kid leaves a visit. To your point, you can talk to a kid, and I know you know exactly what I'm talking about, where he says, like, when you just look at him written, well, it sounds great, but you had the conversation with him, and you know that was just more, yeah, it was nice. I had a great time. You know, it was a lot of fun. Yeah. And, you know, coaches were great. And it's just like, yeah, that kid's not coming. Right. Like he gave you all the quotes you needed, but like that kid's not coming. And then you talk to the kid and you're like, yo, this kid has genuine interest. And there's certain little phrases and Nathaniel had some of those. And one of the things that I believe he said, which is very true, is a lot of guys want to play for Marcus Freeman. There's an intrigue there that's getting a lot of kids on campus that maybe otherwise wouldn't have showed up on campus. Or even when they show up, like I remember when Jason Oweh visited, and just his whole demeanor, his whole thing is like, this kid wants no part of Notre Dame. Like it was so obvious from the minute he got here, Ryan. And like his family liked Notre Dame, like he didn't want to be here. And it was an interesting vibe because it's just like Notre Dame wasn't that place. It is becoming that place now where you're like, hey, let's just go check it out, right? And that's why I keep saying this is such a huge year for Marcus Freeman because if they win, if they're like a playoff team this year, it's going to get crazy. Recruiting here is going to get crazy. The second part is it was a perfect weekend to get him on campus. Forget the snow part. I'm just talking about here's something that matters, Ryan. There's an expression that's been true, and it's true of football more than any other sport, in my opinion, right? And it used to be, I don't know what they say now, but it used to be like, you know, dogs want to play with dogs, right? And that's still a very true thing. I want to play with other dudes. I know in football I can't be that dude if everybody else around me is not. And to have him on campus the same weekend that Deuce Knight is on campus, that Christopher Burgess is on campus, that Ivan Taylor's on campus, that Talon Taylor's on campus, that Owen Strebig's on campus, that Dallas Golden is on campus, and then Mark Zachary's on campus, and Damien Shank. These are big-time recruits. So when you're Nathaniel Owusu-Boateng, you're looking around being like, there's a lot of dudes here, right? A lot of dudes here, and half of them are already committed to Notre Dame. That matters. That's huge for Notre Dame. And I think that factored into why this was a big weekend for him as well. Yep.
And I think you also had the Southeast contingency out there. I mean, you mentioned Deuce and those cats, right? The CJ Mays of the world, but you also had Dallas. I mean, Davion Dixon, who I have an interview coming out with. I mean, he literally said, you know, I'm trying to get another Florida boy to come with me. You know what I mean? Like it's a part of the plan, man. It's a part of the plan. And it's very strategic. Yeah.
If they can land Dallas Golden, that would give them 4 Florida kids in this class. I don't count Nathaniel as a Florida kid. He just plays at a boarding school in Florida. But still, it doesn't hurt because he now knows what Florida football is all about. It doesn't hurt that there's a bunch of kids from Florida.
He represents 2 different things that you need, though. Or 2 different regions that you need. If you don't want to come as a Florida kid, You count him as a DeMatha Catholic kid, which Notre Dame has had a terrible
he's an
time
IMG
getting
kid.
traction in.
Yeah.
Yes, sure.
Yeah, but he's
Sure.
an IMG kid though, Ryan. Like,
Yep.
so in right now Notre Dame's got 3 kids from Florida committed. In the last 5 years, Notre Dame signed 3 kids from Florida combined in 5 years.
Yep.
So they're clearly trying to make it work down there. But the key is you've got to find the right kids. Ivan Taylor's the right kind of Florida kid, right?
Yeah.
Davian Dixon obviously is the right kind of Florida kid. So they're going down there and they're getting those kids, Ryan, that like you're like, okay, that makes sense. Where in the past they'd get some kids, you're like, I'm not sure how that's going to work out. You know what I mean? And so that's a big thing. It's a really big thing. And then of Justin Thurman, I mean, you talk to Justin Thurman for 5 minutes, you're like, you understand. And you also have to remember, like, he's not a native born,
he's a Missouri
and raised.
kid,
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit different, but yeah, they're putting in work in the state of Florida. There's no doubt about that. All right, I'll ask this one, Ryan. This is from Jordan Pinheiro. Hey, Ryan, do you have any idea of how we did on your over-under for silent commits coming out of the weekend?
Jordan, without talking about numbers, right, I would say that I feel very good about, and this isn't immediacy, I'm not talking about like over the next week or two. I feel good about where Notre Dame is with a lot of the players that were on campus this weekend. I think that when we look back on it, you'll look at that junior day list and you'll be like, oh, wow, all those guys that ended up with Notre Dame were there that weekend. That was a very big weekend for Notre Dame. I think that's what it's going to end up being.
I'm going to say this, Ryan. I'm going to put a number on it. When it's all said and done,
yep,
I think Notre Dame gets 7 of the kids that were on campus this weekend that are uncommitted.
Let me look at the list again to make sure I'm not missing guys. 1 second. So I know let me make sure that I'm on the same page here. So of the uncommitted guys that were on campus, Notre Dame is going to get 4, 5, 6. I mean, it's at least 7. It might be more.
I'm saying.
We'll see in the end.
That's what I'm
It's
saying.
at least 7. Yep.
Yeah.
I think so.
All right, let's get to some more. Here, Ryan, that's another NFL one. We'll get another one from Jordan. Who do you have winning the AFC and NFC championships? And ultimately, I can tell you who I'm rooting for, but I have no idea about matchups.
I'm so split on the AFC right now, Jordan. Honestly, like, you may need to ask me later in the week. I mean, look, my early impulse is that I would probably take the Baltimore Ravens if I had to pick one, because I just think the Baltimore Ravens are a better overall football team than what Kansas City is, and Kansas City is going to be on the road again. And I just think that eventually that's going to catch up with them a little bit, because I just think the Kansas City Chiefs are a little bit flawed. But again, then it's like, well, are you counting out Patrick Mahomes? Like, that doesn't seem like the smartest thing in the world, right? I mean,
that's right.
But if you ask me today, I would probably say Baltimore Ravens. Ask me again at the end of the week for the AFC, though. NFC, I am going to be boring and go with the 49ers. I love what Detroit has been doing. I think that they are playing really good football. Jared Goff is playing the best ball of his life. I think the offense in general is incredibly fun and interesting what Ben Johnson's doing on that offside of the ball. And I think that they've bought into the Dan Campbell personality, man. Like, they want to bite some kneecaps off of their teams that they play, which I think is great. It's cool. But ultimately, I think that the 49ers are just a little bit better team. So give me the 49ers, NFC, Ravens today, but that opinion could change by the end of the year. I mean, by the end of the week, I say.
The AFC one's interesting, Ryan, because if you're just looking at it as a Notre Dame fan, you don't have a rooting interest in either of these teams. It comes down to, are you rooting for Drew Tranquill, or are you rooting for Ronnie Stanley and Kyle Hamilton, basically, right?
Kyle Hamilton's so good, man. He's such a good player.
And then on the other side, it's like you've got the Lions have 7 Notre Dame guys on their roster, right? Either on
Brock Wright had a 30-yard catch this week,
it was
man.
huge. It was huge.
Yeah.
And then on the Niners, you've got Aaron Banks starting at left guard. Somebody put out on Twitter, I think it might have been the Irish Tribune, but they put some out on Twitter, and it basically was like, Notre Dame is guaranteed to have a guy win the Super Bowl this year.
Oh, I saw that post. Yeah.
Like a guy that plays, not just like some guy on the scout team, but a guy that plays. Because Drew Tranquill plays for the Niners. The Chiefs. Aaron Banks starts for the Niners. Kyle Hamilton and Ronnie Stanley for the Ravens. And then obviously Brock Wright, Romeo Okwara are 2 guys that play a decent amount for the Lions. So yeah, it's pretty cool. Pretty cool.
I would like to quickly read Kyle Hamilton's stat line this year, because it is wild. For All Pro, by the way, first team All Pro, made the Pro Bowl, 81 tackles, 10 tackles for loss, playing safety, by the way. He plays a little bit of a hybrid role, but 81 tackles, 10 tackles for loss, 3 sacks, 4 interceptions, and 13 pass breakups, playing a hybrid safety role. Kyle Hamilton has been pretty good. Been pretty good as a sophomore in the NFL. He was very good as a rookie as well, but he's been very, very good as a second-year player.
Who all from Notre Dame made the Pro Bowl this year, Ryan? I know Hamilton did, right?
I mean, yeah, Hamilton definitely did.
Kyron
Ronnie
did,
Stanley make the Pro Bowl?
No, I'm sorry, All Pro, not Pro Bowl, All Pro. I'm sorry,
All Pro. I'm not sure. I would have to look at that list.
I think Kyron was second team. I think Zach Martin and Kyle for sure were first team.
Yes.
I'm not sure about Ronnie, but yeah, you're starting to see more.
Ronnie, I think, was banged up a little bit, but yeah.
But you're starting to see more Notre Dame guys that are impact players in the NFL, right? That are very important players. Like Drew Tranquill's not a star linebacker. He's a very important part of that defense, you know, and you're starting to see more and more of that, in my opinion.
Yep. You mentioned Aaron Banks. Aaron Banks is a plus starting guard in the NFL for the San Francisco 49ers.
Yeah.
So
for a team that wants to run the football, you know, I'm happy for him. Very happy for him. He's got an interesting story.
Andy Milton fan with a super chat. Thank you so much, Nathan. Did Tommy Rees or Tyler Buckner fare worse in Alabama move? Oh, Tyler Buckner.
That's not even a debate. I mean, guys, Tommy Rees was the OC for a team that went to the college football playoff, and he got a year of Nick Saban under his belt. He's fine.
Yeah.
Tommy's going to be fine.
He added to his resume, right?
Oh,
he added to his resume. Tyler didn't add anything to his resume. No.
Tyler went from a guy that was battling for the starting job at Bama to a lacrosse player at Notre Dame, right? I mean, he by far, he's worse off. Tommy will be just fine. He'll be just fine. There's no doubt about it. I mean, he was an OC for a playoff team this year. Yeah. You know, I mean,
it stinks that he lost his job and everything, all that type of stuff.
Yes, of course, of course.
But at least he added something to his resume and still had the opportunity to play in a playoff game. Like Tyler didn't get anything out of the deal, honestly. Like he didn't get anything out of the deal. It wasn't great.
I'm going to ask this question this way, Ryan, for you, and I'm curious to get your answer to this one because I'm going to kind of put some clarifiers on it. So Joe Allen asks, who do you think Notre Dame made the biggest impression with over the weekend with Junior Day? So obviously you could put this on like a guy that already came in ready to commit and we think he committed or whatever, but more so like, I'll say it this way. Who did Notre Dame move the needle most with this weekend? I have an idea of who your answer is going to be, but I'm curious if I have it right.
Well, I think it's two guys. I mean, I mentioned Nathaniel Owusu-Boateng. I think that they moved the needle with him, but I think the other one is Jack Lang, the offensive tackle out of Eureka, Missouri. I think that Jack liked Notre Dame coming in, but I think that Notre Dame just still had like a lot of work to do there. But I think leaving, like Notre Dame's the by far leader now for Jack Lang. I think they did that well for themselves over the weekend. So I think you had a chance, Nathaniel Owusu-Boateng, to at least get on the radar. I think you did that, and I think that you propelled yourself up the list and of a reasonable opportunity. But I think Jack Lang, I would say Notre Dame was in kind of this like smaller group of some other Midwestern schools where it was like maybe that's the school, maybe it's not. There was still some clarity that needed to be gained, and Notre Dame was a little bit late to the party with Jack Lang. But from a just offer perspective, I mean, they didn't offer him until November. But ultimately, after the visit, Notre Dame is the team to beat for Jack Lang right now. If this one ends anytime soon, I think that Notre Dame would most likely be the destination. So I would say Jack Lang offensively, Nathaniel Owusu-Boateng defensively. That's the two. We had a question from Lucky Ducks 512. What's up, Lucky Ducks? Will Notre Dame wear the great uniform combo of white pants with green tops this year? I did like that, man. That was pretty nice. Pretty nice on the visit.
Ryan, I have been saying this for years. You know I have. I don't know if you pay attention to me when I talk. Sometimes I don't know if you do. But if you do, then you have to admit, I've been saying this for 2 years, that Notre Dame needs to go with the gold, green, and white combo. They have to.
Yep.
And not in a Shamrock Series game. At home, at night. I would love it if this year Notre Dame's night game is against Stanford. I don't want it to be against Louisville. I want it to be against Stanford. I want the Louisville game to be a day game, 3:30 game. I want the Stanford again to be a night game so you can bring all these recruits in. It's still warm. You blow the crap out of Stanford, and you have all this hype, and then you just run them off the field, and you got the gold, the green, and the white. man, I would love that. I think that would be such a fire combination, man. I can't even believe I just said it like that. Like I just felt like I was like 20
really
or
nice.
something all of a sudden.
Their
But I
uniform
love that combination.
Their uniforms that they pulled out this weekend were awesome, man. Like the green and white combo, and then they also did the icy whites on the snow. I was like, dude,
Yeah.
please,
Were those
man,
the
dude.
BYU game uniforms? Were
I
those?
think so,
Is that
yeah.
what those were?
Yeah.
Those
Yeah.
were
The Shamrock
sweet.
Series one.
Yeah, those were sweet.
It looks so nice with the white too. It just looked
Oh,
like it just
yeah.
looks so clean with the white.
Oh yeah. If they come out with that gold, green, and white, I'm going to be very happy. Very happy. I think that's sweet. Because, like,
It probably
I
will at
think
some
Notre
point.
Dame should always be traditional, like, as far as just overall. I don't want to be like Oregon, where they got, like, some new combo every game. Like, stick to who you are, but one road game and one home game a year, I'd like to see them mix it up. And on the road game this year, we saw it with the all-white against Clemson. I still would have liked to see all-white with green. I think that would have been even sweeter, is if they went with, like, the green colors instead of, like, the blue. But, like, I would love to see that once a year on the road. Give me green numbers on your jerseys, and 1 year at home, give me a different combination. I thought the all green this year against Ohio State was pretty sweet. I like that.
That was nice.
I did.
Yeah, it was really nice.
And then next year, I'd love to see gold, green, and white. I think that would be such a sweet combination. And if you're going to do it, you got to do it at night, because it just pops. That green and white and gold would just pop at night if they do it. I really will.
I have a feeling that we're going to see some more uniforms, different uniform situations over the next couple of years, combinations. Because I would say that Marcus Freeman probably has a little bit more style than the previous head coach. I could be wrong about that, but I think that's a safe assumption to make.
Well, and look, older folks like me may not think that stuff matters, but it does. It does to recruits. It does to players, and that's ultimately who it's for. It's not for us. It's not, and nor should it be.
My favorite was a bunch of just grumpy old men on Twitter were complaining about the recruiting staff dressing like leprechauns and doing all that type of jam,
great.
right? And they're all calling them like, oh, Notre Dame down bad and all this type of stuff. I'm like, guys, you have no idea. These recruits love that stuff.
Love
man.
it.
Outside of the tight end that ended up committing to USC last year in the 2024 class. I don't even remember that kid's name at this point. They came on the one visit and they were pretending to frisk dudes and be like secret agents. Like, he didn't like that, but every other recruit did.
Yeah, his dad liked it, but that's because he literally pulled up. When they pulled up, it was Walter Matthews. When they pulled up, he was dead asleep. So he got woken up to like, what the heck is going on? But no, kids love that stuff. They love it. Absolutely love it. So you can be cranky about it all you want. Kids love it. Now, would I wear that? No, I'm 45 years old, but Chad and Dre, they're younger guys. I mean, but the thing about, they have to understand about Chad and this kind of stuff is this is who he is, right? Like, that's what you have to understand. Like, this is who he is. He's just kind of that outside the box, little quirky, just, salesman kind of guy. And that's genuine. And kids, that's the thing too, is kids sense that. They're out there having fun in that stuff. You know what I mean? Like, they're not just out there doing it they're having fun. And kids sense the heck out of that. And it's kind of like, when you kind of humiliate yourself a little bit, like, you're not humiliate yourself. That's not the answer. That's not what I mean. But like, when you're willing to kind of put yourself out there like that, and make it be fun, like, just that's a being silly. I think kids, it's kind of like an icebreaker, it's like, oh, these guys, and so these kids are starting their day with a good fun laugh and like, these Notre Dame cats are crazy, you know what I mean? Like, that's a great way to, as opposed to this like stuffy, come in there, get your name badge, sit down, get lectured about how great, you know what I mean? Like, that's a fun way to start your trip, and it just continues through the whole weekend, man.
I think that type of stuff humanizes people a little bit too, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's like, some recruiting, I don't know other recruiting departments obviously that well, but like, I imagine that there's some out there that are just kind of like stuffy and just kind of to the point and really business-like. Like, you need to be fun and a little bit energetic there. Because again, we're appealing to 15, 16, 17, 18-year-old kids, man. Like, they're just a little bit of a different, they want that, right? They want that a little bit. So I thought it was, really cool.
Yeah, I did too.
I noticed that Coach Freeman did not jump out of an airplane, though. So
I know. Well, Chad said helicopter. He's helicopter is what he wants.
Well, I think he said helicopter or airplane, though. I think there was a multiple opportunities.
Yeah. Did you see Freeman's face when Chad's like, "Well, he'd have someone with him"? And Freeman's like, so it was, and like Chad's the whole best part of that conversation is Chad just like, "Yeah, of course, I would want to do it." Like,
well, no,
Chad
the
wasn't
best,
even like,
yeah,
go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say the best part was the guy's like, for what reason? And then Chad just super serious. Everyone starts laughing at words, but he's just like, the effect.
Like,
Exactly.
the effect.
Like, duh,
Like,
the effect. But the whole time Chad's just dead serious.
Oh yeah.
Like it
Oh, yeah.
for effect. Like he'd have someone with him. It's not like I'm going to have him jump out by himself. And like he's like, imagine if you're a recruit and you're in Notre Dame Stadium and all of a sudden Marcus Freeman comes rappelling out of a helicopter. Like, I mean, every 5-star kid there is like, sign
And
me
he's
up.
not wrong. He's not wrong.
No,
He's probably not
he's
wrong.
not
either,
wrong at all.
so-
Think about how excited kids get every time Kirby Smart shows up at their high school in an airplane or a helicopter. Right?
Helicopter, yeah.
Imagine if Marcus Freeman jumps out of a helicopter and lands at like the 50-yard line with something Navy SEAL on his back. Come on, man. It's a wrap. It is a wrap.
Well, I think Navy SEAL will be on his back. I was gonna say he'd be on
Yeah.
Navy SEAL's back, but no, other way around.
The other way around. Yeah, that'd be amazing. That'd be amazing. He'll never do it, and Mrs. Freeman will never let him do it ever. But that'd be awesome.
I know somebody was talking about fun facts in the chat earlier. My fun fact is I believe you have to be a tandem for skydiving like 10 times before they let you go by yourself. So there's my fun fact of the day.
There you go.
There you go.
It's pretty wild. Something I will never do once, much less 10 times.
Yes. Also costs like $500 to do it. So I mean it's expensive to jump out of an airplane. But AST 12321. Thank you so much for the super chat. Brian, do you expect to be able to discuss backstory of Notre Dame getting Mike Denbrock from under Brian Kelly and how Kelly hurt things, or is it still under wraps?
I mean, it's under wraps for now. And if I was ever going to talk about it, it wouldn't be on this platform. It'd be on the message board. So yeah, I'm hoping to be able to have that. There's just one person I need to talk to about it before I can really dive into the conversation. But yeah, it's just typical Brian Kelly stuff. I mean, when I tell you, you're gonna be like, dude, that's so Brian Kelly. It is so Brian Kelly. I think Ryan, I told you about it, right? I think I told you the story.
I believe most of it.
All right.
Yeah.
I'll get this next one, Ryan. This is for you. Sean Kelly says, Ryan, I know in the past you said you didn't like the Montez Sweat trade. Do you feel any different about it now or around the same?
Around the same. I mean, I thought that from the jump that Montez Sweat was a good football player. Like that was never the push. The push was though that you're giving up draft capital for a guy that you were going to have to pay big market money. It wasn't as much about Montez Sweat. It was about the situation, right? It was about the process. And as a Chicago Bears team that I still think needs some assets from just roster construction perspective. I know people out there will be like, oh, free agency, and sure, but free agency doesn't fix everything. It doesn't. And usually teams that dive too heavy in free agency usually don't come out the right way. Like it usually hurts them a little bit. So Sean, I think it was the process. Do I think Montez Sweat could still be a foundational part of Chicago rebuild? Yes. But I don't think that giving up as much capital as you did and then putting the contract into him as much as you did, I just don't think that it was the right moment for them. Another team probably could have made a lot more sense. I just think you need to maximize winning windows. And I just don't think that Chicago's in the right winning window now to afford to make a move like that. That was more of a move of like, hey, we need one more guy, one foundational piece, and it's going to push us over the top. You're not even a playoff team right now. You're not even a playoff team right now. So I just think it was the window that I more disagree with. It wasn't anything about Montez Sweat. It was the allocation of capital, both from a draft pick perspective and money perspective, that just didn't make sense for the Chicago Bears right this second. Hopefully that makes sense.
I got a couple more for you, Ryan. Here's one from Brandon Plensner. He says, how do you see the linebacker class shaking out in 25 versus how you would like to see it? What kind of position is Notre Dame in with Christian Jones? Can I just say one thing before you answer this? Sure. We need to take a deep breath with some of the panic about linebacker recruiting. Guys, it's January. They're going to be okay, right? But to answer Brandon's question, Ryan, how do you see the linebacker class shaking out 25 versus how you would like to see it, and what kind of position are they in with Christian Jones?
Christian Jones are in a solid, good position, I would say, Brandon. I mean, look, I think that there are a couple other Midwest schools, namely Nebraska as the main one, that are going to be, it's going to be a battle with. There's no doubt about it. I think that they'll have a chance with Christian Jones, but I mean, they're obviously, you need to get him back to campus this offseason. He's been talking about doing it. He's only visited campus once before, though. If they get him back on campus, I think that you start to ramp that up a little bit. You have a little bit more of a better chance moving forward. But ultimately, Brandon, I think that Notre Dame has put themselves in a solid to good position with a lot of different linebackers on the board. Like we talked about Nathaniel Owusu-Boateng earlier. We talked about Marco Jones in the past on this show. You talk about Noah McHale. You talk about Anthony Sacca.
I think Notre Dame's going to end up signing a better linebacker group than they did in 2024 and 2025. I ultimately do believe that will happen, but it's going to matter about closing on a couple guys. And obviously there's a couple guys that you need to push very hard for. And I think they have an opportunity to do that.
Ryan, so you think the 25 class will be better than the 24 class? Is that what you're saying?
Potentially.
Top to bottom?
Yeah.
Okay.
All around. Yeah. I mean, because I don't look, I would also like to see a little bit more on Josiah Kia, but just what I've been able to watch Josiah Kia, I do prefer him a little bit to Teddy Rizak. I mean, just today, like I do. I mean, ultimately, like if you told me you got a Marco Jones and Anthony Sacca and a Josiah Kia, like, all right, I'm good, man. I'm good to go there. I mean, but it's going to involve closing. You need to get one big headliner in this group, in my opinion, whether it is a Noah McHale, whether it is a Marco Jones, because I don't care what the rankings are for any of these kids. For me, Marco Jones is a top 50 player in this class. Might be higher than that when all is said and done. That kid is a
stud.
Freak show.
Yes.
Freak show. If you're able to get him or a Noah McHale and they get another really good linebacker to go with Josiah Kia, you're good, man. You're going to be good to go moving forward.
Yeah.
Absolutely good to go.
Well, and then, of course, you mentioned Brett Clatterball's on the board. Now, Nathaniel Wusu-Boateng's a legitimate option now. I mean, there's some guys out there that they can go get.
Yeah. Christian Jones, maybe. Like, we'll see what happens. And also, Dominic Kulak being a little bit of a hybrid player, like that gives you some flexibility on the second level as well at times. Right. So, yeah, you're going to be really good.
A couple super chats on here. Actually, no, there was one more I wanted to bring up that's for you, Ryan. I have to ask this one. This was funny. And if you're not comfortable answering it, Ryan, you don't have to. But Jimmy James says, Ryan, how many rooms do you have in your house? It looks like you get sent to another room daily.
Well, no, I got sent to a different house daily because so Mondays, obviously the recruiting hours go a little bit long. I mean, not the recruiting hours, the mailbags go a little bit longer usually. So my wife is handling getting both girls today, obviously, right? So I didn't want the house to be held up for her to get the girls home, just me being like a generally solid person there, right? So, but I am at my sister-in-law's house is where I'm at right now. My house is 4 bedrooms, 2 baths, I guess. I don't know, whatever. Yeah, there's a decent amount of space though. I know you guys have seen me
in the living room.
Yeah, you guys have seen me in the living room. You've seen me in the dining room. You've seen me in Raina's room, my youngest daughter's room. You've also seen me in the hallway of my master bedroom as well. So you've seen me in a lot of different places on IB, a whole lot.
Got a super sticker from Rocket 25, but then he also has a question to follow up with, Ryan. And Here we go.
Rocket says, if Notre Dame can find a way to win the opener at Texas A&M, what do you think of their chances of running the table? Florida State on November 9th is clearly the biggest game after that. On November 9th, that's at home.
Well, I mean, it still depends on roster construction, Ryan. I think when you look at some of the additions Florida State has had over the last couple of weeks, they added that DN from Oregon State. They added a couple guys from Bama. Their roster's much better. I would argue now I think now they have the best roster on the schedule right now. Should Notre Dame win that game? Yeah, they should. But is that going to be a tough game? It will be. USC on the road is not going to be a cakewalk. I think USC, depending, who's their quarterback going to be? I don't know. I think to a degree, I got to find out who they're going to have coming back on the offensive line. But we may say USC finally start to rely more on the run game, which I think is something that's hurt Lincoln Riley. He's gone a little bit away from that with Caleb Williams, understandable. I think they're going to be better on defense next year. Their talent's good, but I like the moves they're making from a position coach standpoint. They got DeAnton Lynn to run the defense. He did a great job at UCLA this year. They hired, it was a Jefferson, right? I think it's Jefferson Henderson, something like that, the D-line coach with the Rams. Yeah. Is now – I don't know if he was their full-time D-line coach or if he was like the assistant D-line coach. Do you know, Ryan, which one he was?
I can look it up. I'm not sure about that one.
But they added him. So, they've made some improvements there. They got rid of Dante Williams and hired the guy that was the D coordinator at Houston. Was it Belk? Tony, is it what's his name? Doug Belk. There you go. So I think the defensive staff has improved. There's no doubt about it. Will that result in better play? We'll find out. I still think Lincoln Riley's got to change how he builds a team to be better on defense, but USC is not going to be a sleepwalk next year. I think USC is going to be improved next year. That does improvement mean 8-4, 9-3, or 10-2, 11-1. I don't know to what level, but I don't see them going 7-5 again next year. in my opinion. And being in the Big Ten is going to be interesting because they're going to just play. They're going to play some teams in the Big Ten that they can just out-athlete next year. That I don't know was true in the Pac. I think the Pac-12 was a really good conference this year, which is a shame that it's dying because that was a really good conference this year. But Louisville's not going to be a pushover. I mean, they've landed some really good players as well. They got that receiver from South Alabama that, to me, can be every bit as impactful as what Jamar Thrash was this past year. Different type of player, but he's really good. They got the kid from who's a solid player. Nothing special, but Ja'Cory Brooks is a solid player from Bama. He'll be a nice rotation guy. Yeah. They're going to have some weapons. They got some defensive players. They got the kid that had flipped. The kid from Tennessee, the DN from Tennessee, was originally going to go to. He was originally going to go to Ole Miss, and then he flipped to Louisville. So that was a really big pickup that they got. So there's still some movement that's going to impact these rosters as well. But running the table is going to be hard for Notre Dame. Yep. I mean, there's going to be enough teams, Ryan, where if you just bring your B- game and they bring their A game, they're going to beat you. The key is just make sure that stumble only happens once. That's going to be the key, is just try to avoid that second loss. That's going to be the big key. But that comes a lot harder if you lose the opener, right? That first game is very important. Very, very important.
Yeah. USC is a very interesting team to me. They also got they got JoJo Marks from Mississippi State, I think, in the portal, the running back, who actually thinks a pretty dang good player. So they're be formatted a little differently, man. Whether it's Miller Most or Jaden Mayava, like they're going to look a little bit different, which sometimes different's good for the change of the program, right? Like you're not going to have Caleb Williams to just be the miracle worker all the time and to be able to make you look good in bad situations. Like you're going to have to run more cohesive offensive approach. I mean, defensively, they should be a little bit better. So I'm very interested to see what USC is able to put together this year.
What's going to happen too, Ryan, if they're better next year. It's going to be, Caleb was overrated and blah. No, I think the problem was their defense was a hot mess. Their offensive line was a problem, and they put too much on him, in my opinion. But, Deuce Robbins, like you said, Deuce Robbins is going to be a year older. Zechariah Branch is going to be a year older. I think some guys that were maybe not in it there for the right reasons are gone. Like you said, they've up. I think one thing they've done too is some of the transfers that they did land, a couple of them, to me, are kids that are going to provide you with a little bit of an attitude adjustment. Akili Arnold's an example. Kamari Ramsey from UCLA. Those are guys that are not your typical they got a D lineman from I think from Vanderbilt, right? The Clifton kid, who are going to be a little bit more blue collar maybe than some of the transfers you got last year, in my view. And I think USC needs a little bit more of that too, which I think is going to help them as well. But Notre Dame should still beat them, right? That's not what I'm saying here. But what I'm saying is they are going to match up a little bit more competitively potentially this year than they did last year. And I think some of the offseason moves are a part of that, in my opinion.
We had a super chat from Michael S. Thank you so much, Michael. So no IB. What school not say no IB? What school not Notre Dame this year had the most exciting recruits that you would be enthusiastic about, and why?
Well, Ohio State has a very interesting class in that I think their class as a whole is overrated because it's a very top-heavy class. But some of the guys they have at the top are very good. Jeremiah Smith is a stud. I mean, he's an outstanding wide receiver. And they've got a couple kids like that you look at and say, well, that's a heck of a football player. Some of the guys they have, I think, like Aaron Nolan being a 5-star, I think is ridiculous. Like I said, their class overall is a little overrated. But Garrett Stover is a kid I would have loved to have had as the rover in this class. Would have loved to have had Garrett Stover. So there's some guys like that they got. I think their DB class was pretty good. Getting Aaron Scott to me this year and Bryce West. I think Bryce West is a solid player, but he's a nice number 2, maybe a nickel. But Aaron Scott's a guy that I really like at corner. I think he's a really good football player. So they got a couple guys like that in their class that I like, Ryan. And had Notre Dame missed out on Keidron Young and then had to settle for James Peoples, I'd have been like, yeah, it's pretty good. It's pretty good back. He's a good player. I think Keidron Young is definitely better. But they had a class.
James looked really good in San Antonio. He may have been the best back there, to be honest.
James Peoples did.
Yeah, he was really good.
Yeah,
He was really good.
yeah.
in
Edric
Toronto.
Houston's a really good player. I mean, he's a really good player. So they did have some guys at the top that I really like. Ryan, they're a team that I thought did well at the top because I think that they filled some holes that I think that they
Mhm.
had in recent years. I thought like their O-line class, they got a couple overrated guys. I think Ian Moore's overrated, but getting him and the two Armstrongs, they're adding a little bit more toughness and length to their offensive line. I didn't love their class from the year before, but those are a couple guys that I would like. I don't know if I could kind of point to teams. I think Missouri getting that Williams and Namari kid was a big one. He's a dude. He's a pretty good player.
He's very good. He's very good.
Yeah.
Georgia's an easy
just-
one, right? Like Georgia's
Right,
a
sure.
stupid class.
Sure.
It's really good.
Well, they got a receiver that Miami, I think is an interesting class too, Ryan, because if you talk about some guys that I really liked, again, Miami's one of those teams that I look at and say, do I love their class as a whole? Again, I think there's some overrated players in it, but there's some guys in it that I really like as well. And there's one that's probably one of my favorite receivers in this class. Nye Carr, the kid that they flipped from Georgia, just popped in my head when you mentioned Georgia. I really like that kid a lot.
Yeah.
I like Nye Carr a lot. I think Zaquan Patterson's a really good safety. I would have been very happy with him in this class. So they got a couple kids too that I look at them like that. Did you ever watch that Jordan Lyle kid that they flipped from Ohio State? He's a pretty good scat back kind of guy. He could do a lot of different type of things. He's a really good football player. So they're another one. I'm just trying to think of like some of the not obvious ones, like Georgia, Bama have guys that obviously you look at, and
Oregon's was nice too. Oregon's was really good.
Yeah. Was there anybody that like Notre Dame went after that they got?
Elijah Rushing. They obviously flipped him.
Got Rushing. Him. Jeremiah McClellan's. I wasn't as high on him as maybe some other guys in the class.
Braden Platt was a linebacker I liked a lot.
Yeah.
I like Braden Platt a lot.
Dakota Fields is a good football player. Let's see here. I know there was a DB, or was that last year's? That was last year's.
They got the iffy kid out of St. Francis that Notre Dame offered,
the
but never
Baltimore
got traction
kid.
with. Yeah, he's talented.
Yeah. Dakota
Kingston
Fields is
Lopa?
not bad. Yep. What'd you think of him? I didn't see his senior film. Did you watch his senior film at all? I thought he was a linebacker.
I liked his junior film though. I liked his junior film, Kingston Lopa.
Yeah. He would have been a rover linebacker.
Project him as a rover apparently. So.
Yeah. They graded him Rivals graded him as a 3-star. I thought that kid had good junior film. Oh, here's a kid that I really like. I have no clue what position he's going to play, but Braden Platt is just a really good football player. Like, no clue if he's a linebacker, is he a running back? I have no idea. Yeah, but that kid's a good football player. That's a good football player.
He was good down in San Antonio too. He was really good.
Recovered a fumble in the game, right? So those are some
a little shorter than I thought he was going to be, but he's a really stupid athlete, though. He's a really good athlete. So.
Yes, he is. All right, that's a good one. Good job, Michael. That's a good question. Made you think a little bit.
Archer452, do you think Caden Proctor's comments are proof that Iowa tampered, or is that blowing it out of proportion? What was his? I didn't see his actual comments.
He basically said, Iowa checked in on him halfway through the year to make sure he was all right, basically. See how he was doing after he struggled. And I'm like, you know why no one's going to report that or no one's going to try anything? Because they know, like, once we open up – no, because once they open up that can of worms, and they're going to realize everyone's doing it. I mean, everybody basically is tampering. So, like, if you're Bama, what are you going to say? Hey, that's not fair. They tampered. And like, oh, really? Do you really want us to go down that road? Right? Let's talk about how many tight ends reported that you guys offered them a bunch of money last year, right? I mean, the Michael Mayer – we have on very good authority. They offered him a huge deal 2 years ago, right? Didn't
Tucker Kraft from South Dakota State.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, dude, you don't think Ohio State's reaching out to kids during the season? Yes, they are. Everybody's doing that. I don't like it. I think that's the thing. Like, if you're going to have the transfer portal the way that it is, Ryan, at the very least, you have to have some rules on tampering. You have to have some rules on tampering. That's the big thing.
Yep. And you're lying to yourself if you think that they were the only school that reached out to Caden Proctor as well. Ronnie 100%. Reeves, even though I understand high 4 stars are as good as 5, even though I understand high 4 stars are as good as 5 stars, why can't Notre Dame get the top 10 talent? And do you agree that getting top 10 recruits would change the perception about Notre Dame?
Sure, it would change the perception, but I don't care. I don't, especially in today's era. I mean, these kids that are top 10 guys, they're coming with baggage you just don't want any part of, in my opinion. Just not all of them. That's not fair to say all of them are, but like, guys, I just don't care about that stuff. I don't. Are you are you landing impact players? Do I care that Cam Williams ranked 32nd instead of 10th? No, I don't. Do I care that CJ Carr is going to rank 50th instead of 25th? No, I don't. I mean, Kingston just ranked 19th. I mean, how many linebackers are going to be ranked ahead of him? One?
Yeah.
None? You know what I mean? Like, look, I've said this again. How many players from the 2022 class are better than Benjamin Morrison? How many players from the 2021 class were better than Joe Alt? Right? Like, that's all that matters to me. Like, are you getting guys that can be elite college players? I don't care where they are as ranked as prospects. If you give me a Benjamin Morrison every year, a kid like with that talent that's ranked outside top 300, that's all I care about. It's like somebody asked me last week, Ryan, when Sean and I were doing a mailbag, why can't Notre Dame get top 5 to 10 cornerbacks to come to Notre Dame with all the success they've had? And I'm like, they have. Like, Benjamin Morrison was a top 5 to 10 corner. Just because Rivals and 247 didn't say so didn't mean it wasn't true. They beat Jimmy Lake and Nick Saban for him. Right, I don't care what people rank Christian Gray as. There were not 10 cornerbacks in the country better than Christian Gray last year. And I'm a guy that wasn't super high on Christian Gray when Notre Dame first got on him. But his senior film, and then when you look at who he went against week after week after week, you're like, dude, Carnell Tate couldn't beat him. Aaron Scott couldn't beat him. Ryan Wingo couldn't beat him. Like, like the dude's doing it every week. So my answer is they are. It's just, but people don't perceive it that way, Ryan, because Rivals doesn't say so, or On 3 doesn't say so, or 247 doesn't say so. And I don't care about that. Plus, the regions where Notre Dame gets a big chunk of their recruits are just not areas where you're often going to find that kind of kid. It's just the reality of it. So, but would it change the perception? To a degree. Yeah.
It would, yeah.
I mean, to a degree. Yeah, I can't deny that.
But
including with, like, not even just fan perception, right, but like with other recruits. I just said dogs want to play with dogs, right? Dudes want to play with dudes, however. So, yeah, if Notre Dame went out and got the number 3 player in the country, like, that's going to matter, right? I mean, sure. I mean, it matters. It's just if the product on the field is showing something that maybe the recruiting rankings aren't, then that's what ultimately is going to have the biggest impact. It'd be nice to do both at times, maybe, but I just don't care about that. I really don't.
It's also just so saturated right now because there's just too many recruiting services that are ranking players overall. Like, because everyone's just looking at composite, and I get it, but like Kingston, who you just mentioned, is a 5-star number 19 player in the country by Rivals, right? He's ranked in like I think he was ranked in like 100 and something by like On 3, I believe, or something like that, or 247, like one of those. I'm just like, who cares when you just have such a diverse opinion?
Ryan,
167th
by On 3. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
On 3 was not a
ESPN
fan
ranked
of
him
him or
102nd.
CJ.
Right.
Yeah. So,
Right.
so there's just such a diverse opinion. Like, look, guys, if Notre Dame landed Jadon Blair, for instance, right? If Notre Dame landed Jadon Blair in the 2025 class, I think he's a top 30 player in the country. I do, truthfully. I just believe that. I think he's ranked by that as one service, but then at one point there was a service that had him ranked as a 3-star. So, like, who cares? I could not care less. Could not care less.
Not at one point, Ryan. Right now, ESPN ranks him as a 3-star right now. And Rivals doesn't even have him among their top 250 players. And again, it's somebody different every time. We think On 3 has some garbage rankings. Well, guess the only group that has Jadon Blair even remotely ranked appropriately to what you think he's top 30, top 50 for me. I mean, it's splitting hairs, right? We both think he's a big time player, but nobody else has him ranked higher than 179th other than On 3, where On 3 is way off, in my opinion, on CJ Carr and Kingston. It's always somebody different. And it's just, I don't know, like some sites, I guess maybe they're better at recruiting other positions, but like, Rivals doesn't think Jadon Blair is a top 250 player. I don't know what to tell y'all. I don't know what to tell you at that point in time. You know what I mean? And so it's like, let's see what they do on the field. Let's see what they do on the field. Because like if last year, if Notre Dame would have signed AJ Harris last year, people would have been like, wow, like that is so great that they got AJ Harris. And I love AJ Harris. Don't get me wrong, but like, AJ Harris didn't play at Georgia. He's transferred now, and when you look at his senior film, to me, it wasn't any better than Christian Gray's. If he'd have come to Notre Dame and played as little as Christian Gray would have played, he'd have left, just like he did. And so it's in this world of NIL and open portal, it's even tougher recruiting top 10 to 15 players if you don't find the right fit because of exactly what we talked about. Like Chase Basantis is a perfect example. I said to you a while ago, that kid was going to jump in the portal no matter what. If he didn't play as a freshman, he's going to jump in the portal and go somewhere else he didn't play. If he did play and play well, which he did for a freshman, he's going to jump in the portal and look for a bigger payday. Fortunately for Texas A&M, they ponied up and gave him more money, and he ended up staying. But that's what you're going to have to do, you got to be careful with some of that stuff if you're Notre Dame.
I was pretty shocked that he went back. I know money talks, but I was still very surprised he went back.
Yep.
Chase Basantis. We don't claim him in Jersey. Mike Reddy with the question:
Smart.
What do you envision the landscape of college football to be in 5 years regarding playoff, NIL, portal, pay for play, and conference realignment? Will the NCAA have any power over major college football? Oh boy, it's a big question, Mike.
Man,
it's a big
I
question,
have no idea. I mean, we're at the point now, Mike, where I don't know what's going to happen next week, much less what's going to happen in 5 years. I mean, unfortunately, and I was talking to my dad about this earlier today, Ryan, I think the whole thing's just going to have to get blown up before it gets fixed. It's just going to have to get so bad that it's just like we have to start this thing over with, whether that's with the NCAA, whether that's outside the NCAA. I don't know what that's going to look like. They're going to need something catastrophic to happen, in my opinion, for this to change. ESPN's going to have to collapse and all the money's gone. That something catastrophic is going to have to happen before they fix it, because the reality is you have too many people that just like I am so sick of seeing lawyers tweet about how great it's going to be to make these kids employees. You don't have an effing clue what you're talking about, right? Because you're going to be the same people bitching about, I can't believe they fired this kid. Guys, if you're in the NFL and you're not living up to your contract, you know what they do? They cut you. Is that what we want to bring to college football? Is that really what you guys want us to bring to college football? Like, no, that's not what we want to bring. And, okay, if you're someone who wants to make them an employee, then, okay, they signed a 4-year contract. They can't transfer. Right? Yeah. That's no different than the NFL, right? You can't just, hey, I'm going to sit out. All right, cool. You sit out. We don't have to pay you. We're not releasing you from your contract because we're going to make sure nobody else can have you either. That's what will be brought to college football. If you think it's a dirty business now, wait till they're made employees. And then they're forced to unionize. Wait till that happens. Like, hold on a second. You're just taking dues out of my paycheck, right? I got to pay this. I got to pay that now. Like, no, this isn't what I thought. But that's what's going to come. And we said the same thing when the transfer portal happened. Like, this is going to turn into chaos. No, it's going to be good. No, it's freaking chaos. When they brought structured NIL, said this is going to be chaos. No, it's not. Yes, it is. And that's going to be worse. But it's going to have to be something really big is going to have to happen, right, to just blow the whole thing up before anything gets fixed. Because I don't think we have competent leadership. I don't think we have anybody that's got the stones to step in and do anything about it. The NCAA's are cowards. They feel like they're going to lose every lawsuit now, and so they're cowards. It's just now everyone's like everybody in the country now feels like, hey, we get a piece of this. We can get our hands in this now, and I hate it. I hate it because nobody is looking out for the game, and nobody really is looking out for the kids. All these people that are saying, oh, make them employees. You're not looking out for the kids. You're either A, not smart enough to understand what this means, or B, you're just someone who realizes what you can get out of this if they become employees. Because like, well, hey, coaches can jump every night. Yeah, coaches can also get fired in the middle of the season. You want players to be able to get fired in the middle of the season? All right. This whole coaches can do this and players can't thing is, to me, it's just utter stupidity and such a weak argument. Yeah. Well, coaches can leave whenever they want. Okay, cool. Do you know what happens when coach leaves? You got to pay a buyout. So is that what we're going to do? Kids jump in a portal. They got to now. You owe us money. You left. You owe us money. You got to pay the buyout now. Is that what we want? You're not playing well in the middle of the season. We don't have to pay your $3 million contract, so we're going to cut you. That what you want? Because that's what happens to coaches. Do you really want to live by that standard? No, you don't. You don't. But it's going to probably come, sadly. And how many kids are going to get completely screwed over before we fix it and then say, oh, our bad, if you can even fix it. So I'm actually very concerned about the future of college football. I really am. But I do think eventually it'll get fixed. I just worry about what we're going to have to go through to get there. That's my big fear, Ryan. It is.
I have no idea what's going to happen in 5 years. 0-0. I think it's going to remain the same to a degree. I think it's going to get a little bit worse because we're going to see like oversaturation again a little bit because like in the NFL draft space, it's great because we're almost out of the COVID year, right? But now we're getting players going back for extra years that we weren't anticipating because the NIL and they're getting bought out and they're going back to school. We had the lowest number of early entrants to the NFL that we've had in like 10 years, I think. There's only like 50 kids that entered early. It's usually 90, 110, somewhere in that ballpark. It's crazy, man. I don't know. So the long answer to say this, Mike, is I have no idea. I just don't have any confidence that it's going to get better in 5 years. Right. Like it's going to be a long way down the road, I think, unfortunately.
Now, that's one of the things that I actually do view as somewhat of a benefit for college football, that some of these kids who maybe have in the past maybe went pro because they maybe needed to. I got to get that paycheck to take care of my family. They can be taken care of now. Some of them are just, okay, who's going to offer me the most? I mean, right, like Cameron Ward. That's different than what I'm referring to, Ryan, which is, know how you and I both know there's kids over the years that are like, I know I'm not ready and I know I'm probably a day 2 or day 3 guy, but I can't afford to go back because I need to get that now because I got to take care of my mom or my dad or I'm a dad now and I got to take care of my kid. You know what I mean? And where now it's like, you can stay in school. You can go get that degree because the school is going to offer you X amount of dollars and be taken care of. So like, it's not all bad. And I'm a support. I think Ryan and I are both supporters of NIL in its correct form, but that's not what's going on right now. I think that's what's going on at Notre Dame and some schools, but like with a lot of this stuff, like that's not what's going on. Miami did not get Cameron Ward because of NIL. They got Cameron Ward because of pay for play. That's what it came down to. And that's not good for the game, in my opinion. I don't think that's good for the game at all.
Ida Benami says, what was the second best player for you last year?
Two best plays.
Sorry. Who was the two best players for you? Or two best plays. Sorry. Was the two best plays from last year? One on offense and one on defense.
Oh, boy. Well, to me, the best one on defense was, I think it was a play that completely changed the season for Notre Dame. And it was the first Xavier Watts interception against USC. I think Notre Dame was reeling coming into that game, Ryan. You'd lost 2 of 3. You lost to Ohio State and you lost to Louisville. You barely beat Duke. And you were closer to going 0-3 than you were to like 2-1 or 3-0 during that stretch. And you're playing Caleb Williams. They'd beat you a year before. There's a lot of and then you just kind of come out in that first drive. You get that pressure. I think it was Javonte had the pressure, right? I think it's who had that pressure on that play. I think it was Javonte Jean-Baptiste. I could be wrong on that.
I don't remember.
Sails that ball to the tight end. Xavier picks it off and runs it back inside the 5. I think that completely changed their season around. That would probably be my one for defense. Offense was maybe Audrick's touchdown against NC State. I think kind of that sparked them in that game.
Not the flashiest, but I think the 4th and 16 run by Sam Hartman to win the football game help win the football game against Duke would probably be number one for offense for me. Yeah.
And it would kind of be for the same reason that I just said for the USC interception, right, Ryan? I mean, if you don't have that, you've lost 2 in a row. Your season, you may collapse at that point in time. Lose 2 in a row, lose to Duke. And you go on the road the next week, you're probably losing to Louisville. Yep. Well, here's the thing. It's kind of like I've always thought about that drive, Ryan, is what was the more important play, the 4th and 16 or 17 or the touchdown run? You say, well, it was the 4th down because that set up the touchdown run, but I've always kind of felt like Marcus Freeman was trying to play for the field goal there. And if Audrick doesn't house that, what's your confidence level at that time that Spencer Schrader is going to line up and kick that field goal? Mine was low. Right. At that time. But again, you don't have that opportunity if you don't convert the 4th
Right,
4th and
exactly.
17.
Yeah, you don't even get into that contemplation unless you get that
Right.
4th and 16.
Right.
So, yeah.
Right. Yep. I'll ask this one, Ryan. This is more for you. I'd be curious, actually, in the chat, you guys let us know what you felt was the best play, best, biggest, most impressive, whatever it is. What was the best play from the season? I'd be love to hear your thoughts on that. Ryan, are you surprised with Will Levis's performance this year? I'm eating crow because I thought he wasn't going to be much in the NFL. I didn't think he was going to be much in the NFL either. So it sounds like he did okay,
Nathan?
but I didn't watch him.
Nathan, listen to me, sir. Listen to me. We do not eat crow or talk in absolutes after a 6-game sample size in the NFL, sir. We do not do that, okay? There are different trajectories to how players play. Some players get off to fast starts. Some players get off to slow starts. You don't count wins or losses or hits or misses in the first year of a NFL player. You don't do it because Will Levis, I think, had a couple of nice games to start his career, and I think he fizzled at the ends. And I am not confident that he is going to be the guy for Tennessee long term. I'm still not confident in that. So that is not neither a hit nor a miss on my part yet. We do not make hit or misses that abruptly. We call that recency bias, and we do not get caught into recency bias, my friends, because just look a few years into the future, man. Things change. Things change very quickly. Last year, I had a pretty high grade on Jordan Love. I had a first-round grade on Jordan Love. Last year, you would have told me, Ryan, you're an idiot. You thought Jordan Love was good.
Fair. Right. I'm sure you had some
This
people
year,
actually saying that to you on Twitter.
Oh, no. Yeah. Oh, I 100% had some people saying that. Now, I look pretty good talking about Jordan Love. Jordan Love looked pretty dang good this year. I had reservations about Jalen Hurts. Last year, people would have called me an idiot. Oh, a guy would have won an MVP. This year, 15 interceptions, 20 plus total turnovers. Let the career make those final destinations in the ends. We will talk about that, okay? Because Geno Smith was another one, Brian. I like Geno Smith coming out of West Virginia. First 8 years of his career, I was an idiot. Well, last couple look pretty good now. Look pretty good. Things change very quickly, man. There is no timeline or hits or misses. It is a looking back. Was that a hit or was that a miss? So, sir, you are not eating crow. You do not eat crow yet on Will Levis. You have no idea if Will Levis is good yet. You have zero idea yet. And nobody else does either.
I have a couple other things to point out about Will Levis there, Mr. Roberts, as well as I'm looking at this. And number one is he threw 4 touchdowns and 0 picks in his first start. He started 8 games. Well, 9 games, but I don't count his last start because he got knocked out, it looks like. Did he get hurt? He only threw 6 passes against the Texans.
I'm not sure about that. Probably.
But in those 8 starts where he actually started and finished, he threw 8 touchdowns and 4 picks. That means after that first start where he threw 4 touchdowns and 4 picks, the next 7 games he threw 4 touchdowns and 4 interceptions. And in his last 4 starts, he threw 2 touchdowns and 2 picks. So I would say, yes, it's definitely way too early. And he was a 58% passer. That's not exactly great in the NFL from what I know. And he had 1, 2, 3 starts where he was below 50. So, yeah, I'd say let's pump the brakes a little bit before we start crowning him as a success. But I think, Ryan, your overall point is correct. You've seen guys, Rick Meyer won NFL Rookie of the Year as a first-year guy. By year, 3? He was out of Seattle.
Mark Sanchez took the New York Jets to back-to-back AFC Championship games to start his career. I don't think anybody in this chat will say Mark Sanchez was a good NFL quarterback. He was not.
That's right. That's right.
We had Adam Anami. How about Plies continually repping for Notre Dame? Gotta love him trying to get Dallas Golden to Notre Dame. It has been pretty cool to watch.
So, first of all, who is that? Who is that guy?
I'm not 100% sure. Sean was talking about him. I meant to look him up, but I know he has over 1 million followers. So he's got a big following for whatever he does, which is
I don't know who he is, but I love that he's pushing for Notre Dame, but more so I love the why. Why is he pushing for Notre Dame? Because he's trying to challenge young people, it would seem, to not just focus only on sports. Right? Focus on building up your entire self. And I think that's a good message because there's far too many young people of all walks of life and races and genders that feel like, hey, this one thing is my path, right? And build yourself up holistically. And that's what he's pushing with Dallas Golden is, don't just be about football, be about all of it. And he views Notre Dame as a place where you can do that. So I don't know who he is, but man, I know Dallas Golden has recognized it. He's liked it and retweeted
he's
it
a
and all
rapper,
that.
apparently. He's a
Okay.
rapper. So there you
Okay.
go. Yeah.
All righty.
Never heard of him, but yeah.
Yeah, I don't know a lot of modern rappers right now, but I mean, I'll take it, right? Because it's working, it would seem, or at least it's one more positive thing that's working in Notre Dame's favor. Is what I'm trying to say there.
He was talking up for Marcus Freeman a few weeks ago too. Remember, during the season about supporting them and that type of stuff,
and then some other idiot tried to get involved. Who we had to destroy. But
speaking of bad quarterback coaches, but yeah.
Well played, my friend. Well played.
Ant VR, do you think the Wild West nature of NIL, i.e. the lack of rule enforcement and the uneven playing field it has created, cheapens the titles being won by teams willing to break the rules?
Well, I mean, have we seen a team that's won that way? And you said it earlier, Ryan. Like, I don't think it's created as much as I hate NIL, I don't think it's created an uneven playing field. If anything, the opposite. Because you have kids picking Miami over Bama and Ohio State and Clemson and Georgia. You have kids coming to Notre Dame that honestly otherwise might not have come to Notre Dame if not for NIL. So I hate NIL the way that it is, but I think the one thing you can't say is that it's created an uneven playing field. I mean, the two teams that just won the national championship, I'd be willing to, if you could like somehow find out how much money all these teams played in NIL, neither of them would be in the top 10. Neither. Like
probably not.
I'd be willing to bet you that. And so, yeah, I don't know that NIL has created an uneven playing field. I think there's a chance that it could happen. Certainly, you have that one team that just has that one off season where they just buy everybody. Maybe they could happen. They could do like the Rams did, right? Is just, hey, we're putting all our chips on the table, knowing that we're going to lose 90% of those guys next year because they're all draft eligible. Okay, sure, I guess, if that's what you're trying to do. But I don't know that it's proven that it can work, honestly, at this point in time. I really don't. I mean, if anything, like I said, it's expanded the amount of teams that can, like Ole Miss right now, is going to be a much greater force next season because of the portal than they would have been in the previous system. Would you agree with that, Ryan? With the guys that they've been able to get through NIL, I think they've been able to get guys because of NIL that they otherwise wouldn't have gotten. I'm not saying Ole Miss is going to win it all next year, but what I'm saying is maybe they play a bigger role in who does win it next year because they can maybe knock somebody off who otherwise might have won it. So right. I think the whole Wild West nature sucks, and I think it's bad for young people. But the one criticism I have is not that it's actually leveled the playing field more than I thought it would. That's been the one thing I think I got wrong about how all this would impact the game, is I just thought Bama and Georgia and these teams were just going to go buy all the best players. And to a degree they have from some teams. Like Vanderbilt basically is just going to get rated every year. Like that's one school that's just, if you have a good player, he's going to go. Some of these other schools are at least more competitive on the NIL sphere. I don't think Vanderbilt does a thing from what I can tell, because every good player they lose every year. Yeah, that's hurt them, but we're seeing Kentucky get some kids. We're seeing, and keeping kids, we're seeing some of those teams be able to hold on to some of their kids that maybe otherwise they wouldn't have in the past. You look at Quinshon Judkins, from what I'm told, Ole Miss was like, go. Like they weren't going to play that game with them.
Their president was very honest about that, and he said something like, "We're not going to pay a running back big money. Like that's just not going to be a thing we're going to do."
Exactly.
Makes sense.
Exactly.
Because I guarantee they have the Ulysses Bentley kid, who's the backup, who I guarantee has probably similar-ish production to what Quinshon had this year, because it's more built upon scheme. Look, I think Quinshon's a good player, but I think that we're a little bit overvaluing him too. I mean, he has 4.3 yards a carry this past year for Ole Miss.
Exactly.
Like, he's a good player. Is he that dude? Like, I don't think so, man. I don't know.
It's a good running back, and again, he's not going to be the best player for them, but he's a guy that they just told, like you said, told to walk. Ulysses Bentley had 5.7 yards per carry last year. Their next running back was at 6.6 per game last year. So, yeah, you look at Quinshon against Penn State, rushed for 106 yards. Great. Carried the ball 34 times in that game. You know, so I don't see it. But I think that's the one thing I got wrong, about NIL is the big schools aren't buying as many players as I thought they were going to buy.
Yep.
But I think partly that's by choice.
I would also say NVR, like the cheapen the title thing. I mean, if we're cheapening every title that a team has won by breaking the rules, and you're cheapening a lot of titles historically, man. It's not just the last couple of years. Like that's been a thing. I mean,
it's just more open.
Let's not sit here and act like there's
never
been money thrown out around. Exactly. The public knows about it more than it once did probably, but like it's been happening for the entirety of college football pretty much.
And what's funny is a lot of the programs complaining about it the most are programs that benefited from it for years because they were the only ones that had the alumni base to pay this stuff under the table, right? Well, now it's like, Missouri's throwing some money around. Oklahoma's losing their mind. How do we lose Caden Green? He got bought. That's bull. Guys, you guys have been paying players for decades. Yep. Decades. And you don't believe me? Go watch The Best That Never Was. And you'll see exactly what we're talking about. You know exactly what we're talking about. It's the Marcus Dupree ESPN 30 for 30, which is one of their best 30 for 30s, in my opinion. Go watch the Pony XS, and you'll see, the Trans A&M. This has been going on for decades, folks. Decades. It's just now it's just more out there. And here's the thing for me, Ryan. If you fix the transfer portal, NIL is not the thing that it's not the demon that we've turned it into, in my opinion. The problem with NIL is that it can be used to just raid rosters. That my issue is not NIL as much as it's the portal, the open portal. That's the issue. Fix that, and then all of a sudden things calm down a little bit. I truly believe that because now it's like you can't just say, hey, man, we'll pay you $1 million to leave that school and come play for us, but I got to sit out a year. Then there's no value in that. There's no value in that. You may see like a quarterback here or whatever like that, but there's no value in that. And then that allows you to then monitor different types of rule breaking, which is more related to just the high school recruiting aspect of it, in my opinion, which you're starting to see them do. I mean, Florida State, which is ironic because Florida's legislature passing the laws that basically kind of cut the legs out from under the NCAA kind of got this ball rolling a little bit. And so I think it's kind of ironic that the first three schools that are just getting crushed by the NCAA, Miami, Florida State, and Florida. I don't think that's a coincidence. And you reap what you sow sometimes a little bit, So, yeah, I think if you got rid of the open portal, this whole thing changes, in my opinion. I just don't know if you can undo that one, Ryan. That's my only fear. Here's one I'm going to ask, Ryan. This is more for an NFL question for you. If you own the Buffalo Bills, would you try to target Jim Harbaugh or Bill Belichick? Your window for winning is closing. Why not go for broke and try to hire one of these guys?
I would have interest in Jim Harbaugh, potentially. I would not have interest in Bill Belichick. I understand why people would, and I actually think the Bills are probably the most optimal situation for him if their head coaching position came open, because obviously there's a lot of talk about the Scott McDermott stuff, because I think that you can count on Bill Belichick having a cohesive a plan of attack structurally, and you can count on a good defense. And if you put those things with Josh Allen, I think you have a chance of being a very good football team, obviously. But one, Bill Belichick's older. I just don't know how long he's going to last. So we're talking about trying to build up a team and being sustainable for year to year. I would try to go a little bit younger. I think Jim Harbaugh does have the similar recipe to what Bill can provide. So if those are my two options, I would go Jim Harbaugh. But again, we don't even know if Coach McDermott's going to be fired. Like, we have no idea. I understand that there's shortcomings.
Do you think they should make a move, Ryan? I mean, just theoretically, do you buy that argument that, hey, he's proven he can only take him so far?
I mean, sort of. I mean, I'd be open to it. Like, if I was the GM and if I was the owner, I would be doing my due diligence just with the first understanding what's out there, what's the landscape, and if we could do better than Coach McDermott, because I do think that you might be in a situation where it's like Andy Reid with the Philadelphia Eagles a few years ago. Andy Reid's a great coach, but you would just kind of hit that plateau with Andy Reid as the Eagles head coach. Like, you probably weren't just going to break it through, right? Like, that was kind of where you were in that type of situation. So I would be open to it depending upon who you're
short list was and who was a guy that you really want to go after. If it was either one of those two options, I would opt for Harbaugh over the over Bill Belichick. But I don't know. I think there's something to be said about sustainability. But again, if I'm an owner and I'm just looking at this team that just can't continuously get over the hump of trying to win a Super Bowl, I would at least have my eyes open to possibilities potentially.
Here's my, again, this is someone from who doesn't follow NFL that closely, but I'll just say this. Sometimes you got to be careful what you wish for, because you're complaining about a coach that can't get you over the hump. But in reality, before he showed up, your team was a joke for a long time. So sometimes It's like, maybe that's the best your organization can do right now. Maybe it isn't. I don't know. But we've seen this before, Ryan, where teams have fired a coach who couldn't get him over the hump, and then they replace him with a guy that makes him suck again. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Like,
but would you just be consistently? But would you like to consistently be okay and just not know that you're going to get over the hump, or would you like to try to make a change? I mean,
100%. No, I'm with you. My whole thing is it's a double-edged sword. Maybe it takes you that next step. Maybe it's just this, because we've also seen it with like the Chargers with Marty Schottenheimer, right? Like that was the big beef with him. It's like, hey, he can't get you over the next hump. Well, what have the Chargers done since they got rid of Marty? The Redskins, when they, with Mike Shanahan, right? And Joe Gibbs, the Redskins were pretty decent during that stretch. And then they got rid of them because they couldn't take them over the hump, and the Redskins have been a joke ever since, right? I mean, so it's kind of like, careful what you wish for. But then there's organizations that have made that move, and it took them to the next level, right? I mean, it got them over
worked
the
out
hump.
For the Philadelphia Eagles.
Right.
I mean, again, it's not sustainable, but you got rid of Andy Reid and you won a Super Bowl a couple years after that. I mean, it worked technically. I mean, you have to sell your soul a little bit, but it did work.
Right.
So
Now, Andy Reid's gone on to win, what, 2 or 3? How many Super Bowls has he won? 2?
I think he's won 2 so far.
Two
so far. Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, it worked out for both to a degree. But, I mean, there's always kind of that notion of, okay, like I said, be careful what you wish for. Right. Are you surprised the Cowboys didn't move on from Mike McCarthy or not?
Am I surprised? No, I'm not surprised, because Jerry Jones wants a puppet as his head coach, and that's his puppet. So I'm not totally
Which is why he's not going to hire Bill Belichick or Jim Harbaugh, basically, kind of guy.
Oh, yeah, he would never hire Bill Belichick. Yeah, he would never hire Bill Belichick.
Yep. All right. It's a good one. Short and sweet question and answer, I think.
Item Benami, do you think if Notre Dame wanted to pay for play, could they compete with Ohio State and Miami money-wise?
100%. Yes. Could they? Absolutely. If they wanted to, absolutely could. So
very few programs that they would not be able to compete with in that capacity. So
yeah, I don't know. There are. I mean, look, guys, I know 3 guys alone that could basically bankroll Notre Dame's entire roster. You know what I mean? Of being able to compete with those teams. There's no doubt. They're not going to do it, and honestly, nor should they. But if they wanted to, they could. There's no doubt.
Yeah. We had 99 problems with BK1. What's up, 99 problems? Some Notre Dame fans seem to be freaking out about Ohio State right now. I truly don't get it. They haven't been title winners since Urban Meyer, and their only big name transfer they got that I want at Notre Dame is Caleb Downs. I think that's a fair point, because I think that 99 problems may have commented on Twitter about this, or somebody else said something similarly. But when you look at the list of the high-profile transfers that Ohio State has landed this year, the money guys, is there anybody out of Caleb Downs that you would even want off of that list? Like, if you're Notre Dame, I mean,
they only have 6 guys.
Yeah.
I mean,
they were just all, just bang moves, I guess, if you want to quote unquote say that, whatever. I would say this about the whole situation, 99 problems. And I said it a little bit earlier, and I said it on Twitter yesterday. Ohio State is always super talented, man. They were really good last year. They were really talented last year.
Are either one of these quarterbacks going to be CJ Stroud, Ryan? Are either one of these kids going to be CJ Stroud at quarterback?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. So I think that you upgraded slightly at quarterback. I think that you have another good running back to go with your already good running back. Like, I think that you got a difference maker at safety. I think you did that. But that still doesn't change the holes that I believe still exist on that team. And part of it is head coach oriented. Part of it is mentality oriented. And I think if you were going to empty the bank a little bit in transfer portal, probably should have went out and got an offensive lineman or 2. Like, I think that's
and then the one offensive lineman they got just got his butt handed to him by Michigan in the college football playoffs.
Seth McLaughlin.
You know what I mean? Like that's the only old lineman you went out and got was that guy. Like,
my favorite was somebody replied to me and said, "Oh, if he could play guard," and I'm like, "Dude, he could play guard, he could play tackle, he could play center. He stinks. What do you want me to say about him?
He's
Like,
not going to be very
player.
good no matter where he plays.
He's not a good player.
100%. No, and like, look, Quinshon Judkins a good player. Notre Dame didn't need a running back. Julian Sands, look, I think CJ Carr is better than Julian Sands. That's basically who you'd be looking at. I mean, so to your point, Ryan, Will Howard, Notre Dame could have gone after Will Howard. They liked Riley Leonard more than Will Howard. And you know who else did? Ohio State. So,
no, that was the guy from the beginning. You have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. I love the sarcasm there, Ryan.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. But no, I mean, look, Caleb Downs would have been a big one. That's the only one.
Yes.
That would have.
Oh, no doubt.
That would have been huge, and that's huge for Ohio State. But to your point, Ryan, Ohio State always is talented. They always have a top 5 roster in college football. That's Ohio State did not win it this year or last year because they didn't have a great roster. Right? They won it because they have a soft head coach who's not really shouldn't be a head coach in my opinion. My favorite, like I've said this before, I have a love-hate relationship with social media. I hate it in a lot of ways, but there's also some things I really like. And the memes are my favorite. And my favorite meme that I've seen recently is the one where they show that Urban Meyer playing the video game, and then Ryan walks in. It was that whole transition of power between him, and he gives him gives him the sticks, and he's like, "Okay, it's yours now." And then the meme quits, and and it's him driving a bus off of a cliff on a video game. It's like, oh, that's so great. The internet is great, and when it comes to things like that, but he's still their head coach. Now, here's the thing: if Ohio State were to move on from him in the next year or two, whoever replaces him is going to inherit a pretty talented roster. There's no doubt about that. But that's there's no doubt.
Same thing with Penn State, man. Same thing with Penn State. If that ever comes open and James Franklin ever leaves for whatever reason, whether it's Penn State related or not, somebody's going to walk into a gold mine. They're going to be like, what? There's that much talent here? That's crazy, man. Crazy.
That's right. I'm going to respond to this comment. NIL and transfer screws the service academies. I don't know if this is a sarcastic comment or a real comment. I'll treat it as if it's a legitimate comment. Guys, the service academy, I actually disagree with this because there's more high school. The whole point of this whole thing is that, number one, service academies are not losing kids that they otherwise would have gotten because of the portal and transfers. You can't just open it up and transfer if you're at the Naval Academy. It's a whole different set of rules. You can't just up and transfer if you're at Army. I mean, it's a different set of rules. And you're not losing kids. Well, we would have got that recruit, but NIL, if anything, Ryan, this whole thing of not as many high school kids are getting signed creates more opportunities, in my opinion, for the service academies to find players they can go get. So I don't agree that and a kid that's going to the service academy is genuinely not going to be transferring for the same reasons that other people are, right? You'll have the occasional Lohi Gilman who goes and then they change a rule and it's like, well, that's not what you promised, essentially. And I won out, but it's just a different universe. And so, no, I don't think those things are hurting these service academies at all. If anything, if they handle it right, it could maybe help them a little bit because they can get some kids that maybe otherwise, they wouldn't be able to get. So, yeah.
Poor service academies have a lot of things that they need to work through to try to be competitive in football. So it's a little tough.
Yeah.
A little tough.
Real quick thing, USMA says, just joined. Any updates from junior weekend, or will they be saved to the Friday show? They will be more so on the message board. So obviously we'll talk a little bit about that at times during the week, but those updates right now are going to be from junior day on the board. And we have talked about individual players throughout the show, but I would encourage you, Ryan, you had what, three intel pieces, three intel pieces on the board about the junior weekend, plus several stories. Actually, I got to go publish another one of your stories. I'm gonna have to do here. You have a couple that are in the admin that I got to go publish. Yep. So we'll get those out there too. Also, so yeah, lots of stuff at irishbreakdown.com, and then of course on the message board at boards@irishbreakdown.com.
We had a question from Nathan Milton. What happened with Al Golden at Miami? Oh man, it was tough. It was tough that time. So Brian, I remember when Al Golden took over Miami, they right after he got there, he ran into the issues with like the sanctions that were handed down. So they like limited some scholarships that he got and just made it a little bit difficult because he was actually recruiting decently early at Miami and then like just less
If I remember
scholarships.
correctly, Ryan, he knew that they were going to get hit with sanctions when he took the job. But if I remember correctly, they were hit a little harder maybe than people thought.
Yeah.
And that hurt. I also think it was a bad fit. I mean, he's a Northeastern guy. He's a blue collar Northeastern guy that's, a little rough around the edges in certain areas. And he was walking into a program that honestly is just, as an entire program, it's just mentally soft.
Yeah.
And
he's a builder. He's not a quick fix guy either. Like he's more
and they
like
wanted a quick fix.
Year 4, like we'll get there type of thing. Right. Yeah.
Well,
I mean, he did the hard way at Temple, man. There were no quick fixes at Temple. It was like 1-11, slight improvement, and then eventually you get him to like a bowl game. Like it was a slow process.
The other thing that hurt Al Golden too, Ryan, is the Miami unrealistic view of who they were when he took over. I mean, if you really look at it, Al Golden was starting to build Miami. They went 6-6 in his first year. In his second year, they went 7-5 and tied for first in the Coastal Division that season. And they were on probation, so they couldn't like play in a title game. They couldn't play in a bowl game. They were not bowl eligible first 2 years. And then in year 3, they went 9-4 that season. But at that point in time, there was so much just negativity. They beat Florida that year, by the way, who was ranked 12th at the time. But there was so much negativity around him that it had created a toxic environment when you combine with the sanctions, had made it hard for him to attract talent there. Because it was by year 3, they wanted him out. I'm like, dude, he just built a team on probation to 9 wins in year 3. Like James Franklin is still getting love for doing something similar at Penn State. You know what I mean? But the negativity around him, because again, he just was a bad fit for South Florida. He was never gonna have a chance. I mean, it's like Will Muschamp, the guy that was at Auburn. I'm drawing a blank right now. He's at UCF now. No, he's at UCF now.
Oh, what's the guy's name? Yeah, I know you're talking about.
I cannot believe that I'm Gus Malzahn. That's who it is.
Malzahn, yeah.
Like, there was no way he was ever going to get Auburn back on track by 2018 because there was so much toxic around him with the boosters and all this other crap that he just kept doing enough to keep them on, but he was never going to fully get them back on track because we're never going to have this recruiting success that you could potentially have, because every year it's like, well, if I go there and we have a down year, he's going to get fired. And I think that's something that hurt Al Golden as well. Here's one for you, Ryan, from Andrew Gilmore. Who would want the Titans job? They fired an elite coach and they have no QB. I'd be very curious to hear your thoughts on all of that.
Andrew, I would say this about the Titans job. I think Mike Vrabel is a very good coach, but there are some times where a guy isn't the right fit at the right time. I mean, you look at that team is getting progressively worse. Like, they're getting progressively worse. They're not getting better. They're coming off of a couple of down years in a row. I agree with your premise that I think that Mike Vrabel is a very good coach. And I think he's going to land well on his feet here. And I think that he could be good in a certain situation. But I think that I think Tennessee needs to evolve a little bit. They need to change their perspective a little bit moving forward. They're not just going to be this gritty power running team and be able to, play, be that type of team anymore. I think that they need to kind of go a little bit different. It's similar to what we talked about. Like, I think some guys just kind of hit that spot where it's just like, is it going to get a ton better? And it doesn't make a team not a good coach. It doesn't make a job not a good job. It's just fit matters at the right time. Timing matters so much in the coaching industry. So I think people will still want the Tennessee job. I think Tennessee needs to be very strategic with who they go after. Maybe a little bit more of a younger, offensive, innovative guy comparative to that, like Mike Vrabel style, which is very defensive, slow pace. Like, I think you need a little bit of a change. And Tennessee could get a quarterback if they wanted to in the draft. They can make that happen. They have a top 10 pick. If they don't like Will Levis, if the next regime doesn't like Will Levis, they can figure that out, man. Whether that's move up a little bit to try to get, a Drake May, or if they like Jaden Daniels and they want to try to make that happen as well. I think Tennessee could still be a desirable job. I'm just not sure Mike Vrabel is exactly who they want to be or what they should be moving forward. I don't think it's a meshing of identities that work right now. It's a little bit different.
I'm going to ask you this question, Ryan. Can you really be considered an elite coach when in 6 years you've had 2 years with 10 or more losses, you've never been in the Super Bowl, and you've been 13-21 your last 2 years? Like, I mean, can you really be considered an elite coach with that resume? I mean, like you said, good coach, sure.
Yeah.
But, and 3 of his 6 years, his team didn't make the playoffs.
Yep.
And they lost in the divisional game most recently. He's 2-3 in the playoffs, and his 2 wins were his first 2 games in the playoffs. They won those 2, and then they've lost 3 in a row in the playoffs.
Yep.
So I would kind of push back a little bit on they just fired
He's
a
coach.
coach. And I would argue that his style, from what because again, I watch a lot of playoff football, I always felt like his style was always limiting. There's going to be a peak with his style in today's NFL, in my opinion.
Andrew Gilmore, does the success of Kalen DeBoer, 2 years at Washington, Sarkisian, 3 years at Texas, and Dan Lanning, 2 years at Oregon, put pressure on Marcus Freeman? Does he need to make a playoff and probably win a game?
Well, I mean, no. I think the only guy in there that has anything to do with Freeman is Dan Lanning, because he's the only guy that's never been a coach before. He's the only guy that you can even compare the resume to, which is very comparable. And I would argue that Dan Lanning walked into a better situation than Marcus Freeman in some areas, but he's done a better job than Marcus Freeman has based on the track record. But I mean, Sark's first 2 years at Texas, they went like 5-7 and 8-5.
People were talking about if Sark would have had a down year at Texas, maybe he would have been moved on from after this year.
Which I think is nuts. But Kalen DeBoer has been a head coach at multiple places before. He's much older. He was only at Washington for 2 years, but he was at Fresno State for 2 years as a head coach. He was at Sioux Falls for 5-6 years. So I think every situation is different. This is Sark's 3rd head coaching job. He's been at Washington and USC. So it's a lot different situation for him than what Marcus Freeman is dealing with at Notre Dame. I think Dan Lanning is the one that could maybe apply some pressure, but Dan Lanning's been 1 or 2 games better than Marcus Freeman record-wise. I think the perception is better, and the results have been better. But Dan Lanning, what's his record against Kalen DeBoer? It's 0-3. So it's like, they're beating the teams they're supposed to beat. And but look, I don't think any of that is going to put any more pressure on Marcus Freeman in year 3 than just being the head coach at Notre Dame in year 3, Ryan. Like, I don't think he was like, well, Dan Lanning did this. No, it's going to be like, dude, you're the head coach at Notre Dame. You're expected to win. And then the other question I would have is, when you say, doesn't he need to make a playoff and probably win a game, for what? Like, I don't know what you mean. Like, to not feel pressure, to get fired. Like, I would want to understand kind of what you mean by that. In regard to saying like, hey, you need to win a game. I'd say if Marcus Freeman makes the playoff this year and they go 11-1, make the playoff, lose in the first round, I think that would create some, okay, is he really a guy that can win big games? I think it'd be a fair thing to say. But I don't think there's barring them just going 8-4, 7-5, an ugly 9-3. I don't think there's going to be anything that makes people say like, this isn't the guy. Anything that gets them to the playoff, I think says, okay, he's a good coach. We just don't know how good, in my opinion. But I mean, none of those guys have won a championship, and that's ultimately what you're gauged by at Notre Dame. So,
right.
I think just being at Notre Dame is enough pressure on itself.
Right. Well, I think that you need to show that you are continuing to grow as a team, right? Like, I think that you need to show that you are able to maybe take the next step. I mean, a playoff berth should be expected at this point, right? Like a 12-team playoff, Notre Dame should be in the playoff next year. If they aren't, that's a very underwhelming season, as we will talk about, I'm sure, if that happens. But if you make the playoff, you maybe win a game, you go in 11-1, then you start feeling a lot better about the future of the program, for sure, because that's showing, again, it's about sustainability and continued growth. Like, if you just hit stall points, it's like if Notre Dame goes, let's say they go 9-3 next year and they miss the playoff, you're just like, where's the growth, man? Like, are we moving forward here? Like, I think it's just there's hesitancy as a Notre Dame fan to buy fully in if you don't see that type of growth.
Yeah, agree. And another one from Andrew. This is going to be an interesting conversation.
Andrew says, Brian, if a coach leaves, then players should be able to leave, right?
A, name me one time a player was never allowed to transfer. Name me one time. The answer is it's never happened. Players were always allowed to transfer. Always. There was never a you can't transfer rule. There were you can't transfer here rules, which I think are stupid. I never liked the you can't transfer within the Big Ten or within the SEC. That was always dumb. But players have always been allowed to transfer, number one. So if a player leaves and a coach can leave, okay, sure, players can leave. No one here, I'm not advocating for, Ryan's not advocating for, no one's advocating for players not being able to leave. They can leave. I transferred in college. Transferring is good. You need to be able to, that's the only leverage players have in this coach-player-school relationship for most of our lives is, you know what, I'm leaving. You don't want to do this, then I'm leaving. And sometimes it's for stupid reasons and childish reasons, and sometimes it's for legitimate reasons. Hey, man, you do keep doing this, I'm out. You know what I mean? Totally fair. I left. I was talking about with my dad about this. I left. I started as a true freshman. We had the best season in school history, went 9-1 and ranked in the top 25. I left because I got lied to by my coaches during the recruiting process, and I can never trust them again. That's a real thing, right? But Ryan, this notion that they can't leave is fine. But here's the thing, or that they need to be able to leave, they can. But here's the deal, right? If a head coach leaves, then he has to do what? There's a buyout involved. There's all these different things involved. So would you be okay if we're going to make it same level? Would you be okay if a player left if he had to pay back half his scholarship money that the school gave to him, or if he had to pay back half the NIL money he made? Would you be okay with that? If you want to get players and coaches on the same page, would you be okay with that? Would you be okay if, let's say Notre Dame gave Sam Hartman $3 million this year, and halfway through the season, their season was over. They wanted to move on to a younger quarterback, didn't want to have to pay him that much money, so they cut him and said, we're not going to pay you that money anymore. Would you be okay with that? Because they can do that to coaches. Or we're only going to pay you X amount. I'm going to pay you $1 million of your $3 million we owe you because you weren't getting it done. Would you be okay with that? Would you be okay with players being able to get fired after every season and just you're gone, no explanation, no severance, nothing, just fire them? If you get off to a bad season, fire a player right in the middle of the season. That's the world that coaches live in, number one. And number two, we have to stop comparing what's going on with adults with what's going on with 18, 19, 21, and 22-year-olds. They need to be able to have the freedom to move schools. No one is arguing about that. I've advocated for having contracts that they sign with colleges that if you promise me A, B, C, and D, and you don't deliver A, B, C, and D, I can transfer without punishment. I support that. I've advocated for that, Andrew. You've heard me talk about that for years. If you promise me playing time and you lie to me and I don't get playing time, then I can leave. Now, sometimes I'm not getting playing time because I didn't do the work. That's fine, but you can still leave. If you promise me X amount of dollars and you don't give it to me, then I can leave, no consequences. I believe if a head coach leaves, that players should be allowed. I've said this before. If a head coach leaves, that players should be allowed to transfer right away with certain exceptions to the timing of it. The only exceptions should be timing. So, for example, if a school fires a head coach, then players should be able to immediately jump in the portal because that's a choice that that school made. They chose to fire that coach. If a school, if a coach leaves on his own, like Kalen DeBoer left, right, then I think there should be like a window of a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks or whatever that the school should be allowed to kind of sit down with each player and make their pitch and say, hey, let's give them time to get the new coach in. And if they don't then like the new coach after that certain period of time, then they can jump in a portal and play right away. So there are always circumstances, in my opinion, that players need to be able to have the freedom to go right now. There should be certain waivers that allow players to transfer right away. Legitimate things, right? Like you have to legitimately prove that your mom has cancer or whatever the case she's dealing with. You should legitimately prove that, certain things that should allow for freedom of movement. But this open system of just you can go whenever you want with no consequences is nothing like coaches doing the same thing because A, They're not employees. There's different standards for how coaches are evaluated and treated. There are certain expectations for coaches that are not involved with student athletes. And the other fact of the matter is that there are punishments when you leave. There are financial consequences to leaving that don't exist for players. So if you want to say, if they can do this, then they can do this, then you have to also be willing to say they then have to have the same consequences for leaving or being employees or being student athletes that coaches have, meaning they can be fired whenever, they can be fired right before the season, they can be fired during the season, they can be fired late in the season, cut, whatever expression thing you want to say. If a star quarterback making X amount of dollars wants to leave, then he has to pay, then there's a buyout involved. You have to pay back, the new school has to pay back, somebody has to pay back the money that you made. That's what's the reality for coaches. Because again, there's never been a rule as far in my lifetime that said the players can't transfer ever. But as someone who's actually been in college athletics, who has transferred, who has dealt with players transferring, who's been in this business for a long time, I can assure you that there are more immature decisions that these kids are going to come back to regret down the road that they're happening now than what happened 5 years ago because of the open portal. What I have said is not the players can't transfer. No one's saying that. So the entire premise of your question is just it's a straw man. It has no bearing on what's actually going on. What forcing kids to sit out a year, if they just decide they want to leave or make more money, all that does is it ensures you've had to put a lot of thought into that decision. And you're not making emotional decisions. There are so many emotional decisions that are going on right now. So many emotional decisions. And some of the guys that have transferred, like Caleb Downs, in my rules, could still go to Ohio State. Julian Sand could still go to Ohio State. Jamie Bernard can still go to Washington, can still go to Alabama. All those kids can still leave. Why? Because their head coach left. That should open it up. There always need to be rules in regard to that. But this notion that players and coaches are on the same level is one of the lamest, weakest, useless things that you can say when you're trying to say, what rights do players have? Players have always deserved more than what they've gotten. They've always deserved a piece of the pie. They've always deserved the ability to have freedom of movement. But freedom of movement doesn't mean that I can just go whenever, wherever, however. That's not what it should mean, especially for younger people. So as long as you're willing to say, cool, players can leave whenever, open portal. All right, I'm fine with that. But just so you know, you also have to accept the fact that players can be cut whenever they're not living up to the money they're being made. They have to then pay back part of their scholarship and part of their NIL money if they do decide to leave. If you're willing to accept all those things, then cool. We can put players and coaches on the same level, and this would have more relevance. But the fact of the matter is, this has no relevance because it's not the reality of the world we live in. Players have always been able to transfer. Ryan, didn't you transfer as well? I think you and I both transferred. Or did you just stop
I
playing?
didn't. I didn't. Just stopped playing. But
okay,
yeah, I did end up transferring schools. But yeah. Mm-hmm.
So again, no one's saying you shouldn't be allowed to transfer. No one's saying there has never been a rule saying you can't transfer, but there's a right and a wrong way to do it. And if and here's the thing: if your issue is the way that coaches can leave, then that's cool. Let's make rules to limit the freedom of movement they have. I'm cool with that. I'm okay saying, hey, look, let's make the buyout such, or let's make this, or let's make that, or let's set some rules saying, hey, if you're a coach and you choose to leave, whether you're a head coach, assistant coach, whatever, there are certain rules that are in place. Okay, I'd be for that because I think the way that they do this whole thing is kind of shady on both sides. Coaches getting fired in the middle of the season. I hate that. Barring a coach doing something that's like, that guy's got to go, right? Like that guy's breaking some rules. That guy's doing this. That guy's hooking up with a co-ed or an undergrad or something. All right, cool. That guy's got to go. You broke rules. But just firing a guy because he's having a bad year and you're trying to get a head start on the coaching stuff, I don't like that. So, yeah, let's make some rules that they're, in those situations, players can leave. No restrictions. Players can go. I'm all for that. So there are things that you can do to make it to where maybe we can tamp down a little bit on some of the coaching movement. I'd be for that, but let's not take one problem and say this is a problem, so let's make this problem equally as bad, if not worse. That's what people are advocating for now. Not, hey, this sucks, So let's fix it. It's no, this sucks. So let's make sure it also sucks over here. And I think that's absolutely ridiculous. And in no way, shape, form, or fashion, absolutely, in any way, makes the game better. And in no way is it better for young people that they can make these decisions. Because I promise you that we are not even remotely understanding the damage we're doing to young people when you look at 10, 20 years down the road. And I can tell you that because I had zero doubt that I made the right decision to transfer when I was 19 years old and an idiot. But now as a 45-year-old, I absolutely look back and say, I didn't handle that like I should have. And looking back on it, I would have handled it. Maybe I still transfer, but I didn't handle it. I was very emotional. I was all these different things. I mean, I regret how I went about the process, even if the end result wasn't the same. I promise you a lot of young people are going to go do that. And we're just all encouraging it because we're in our feelings about being pro player. Let's be pro player. You're not pro player. You're not pro player at all. Because if you were, we wouldn't be having these stances. We wouldn't. We'd be talking about other things than what we're talking about right now. This is more about just wanting to, and I'm not saying you, Andrew, I'm talking more about like the media people and stuff like that. That's more about just, we want to be seen, on the quote unquote right side of history. And I think that's just not a place where I want to be. I want to be on just the right side. That's what I want to be on. And my side is, are we really doing the right things to make the next generation better? Right? That's what we're tasked with. When you're a parent, Ryan, you're a dad. I mean, your job is to what? It's to make sure that society is going to be positively impacted by my children. They don't have to struggle through things I went through. They can learn from the lessons that I went through, right? It's to create people that are going to have a positive impact on society. And right now, we're not doing that because we're just telling young people, and all, this isn't just sports, in all walks of life. Hey, if you don't like what you're doing, just go cry about it and walk away. And if somebody hurts your feelings or somebody offends you or you're triggered somehow, we're going to make a safe space for you. That's not real life. And you're not helping people by doing that. And so that's why I really despise this whole process. Yes, rules need to be changed. Players need more freedom. Players need a bigger piece of the pie. Players need all types of things. But what we're giving them now is not the answer. We've made a sucky system worse in an attempt to be pro player, and we're not. You think Aaron Nolan feels like it's a real pro player situation right now? You think that's a real pro player situation that he feels he's in at Ohio State right now? I doubt it. I don't. I wouldn't if I was him. So no, I don't like it. So, yeah. Let's see here. We'll go down to this one.
Yeah, John Haynes said, who would be a good Dallas Golden comp on the college level? That's a good question.
I have two, Ryan. You want to hear mine? Just overall, as an athlete, Xavier Watts. I mean, it's two Notre Dame guys. Xavier Watts, just a guy that can be an impact player on both sides of the ball, can play safety. Xavier could play rover. Xavier could play receiver. Xavier could have done a lot of different things. And then as a corner, I really think his athleticism, his frame, how he moves is very similar to what I thought of Benjamin Morrison coming out of high school, to be honest with you. Very similar body type, very similar athleticism, not a burner, but plenty of speed, very great feet, great balance. So when I watch Benjamin Morrison's film at Brophy Prep, I see Dallas as a stronger version of that. Like, I think Dallas is stronger at this age than Benjamin was in high school. I think he's a tad thicker, but that's mine. That's the one I see, and that's the one I put in my breakdown this weekend for Dallas is those two. But those are the two best comps that I could come up with.
Let me think on that one, John. I haven't thought of, because usually we only do comps for team, players that end up in the class. So we obviously need to see if Notre Dame's able to close on Dallas. So let me chew on that one for a little bit, man. I mean, he's a very unique player because he could play corner, he could play safety, could play nickel, could play wide receiver, could be a wildcat quarterback if you wanted him to, could return kicks and punts. He's a special athlete. I just need to chew on that one a little bit longer. It's a good question. Very good question.
Got a couple super chats down here, Ryan.
Michael S. with Super Chat, thank you so much. Didn't Ohio State get Bama's top DB and top quarterback impact on the team? Well, they didn't get their top quarterback. They got their top quarterback recruits for sure. Yeah. But, I mean, Julian Sain was not going to start for Alabama in 2024 more than likely, right? Like, that wasn't a situation that was probably going to happen. But yes, they got their best DB, especially if the guys returning. I mean, they're going to lose a couple really good DBs in Kool-Aid McKinstry and Terrion Arnold to the draft. But I think even if both those guys return for whatever reason, you can make the argument that Caleb Downs was the best one. So yes, they got their best defensive back. They're heading back into 2024. Best quarterback? No, they got their best quarterback recruits.
Yeah. And if a young player does get the job over Aaron Noland, over Jalen Milroe, it's probably going to be Dylan Lonergan, not Julian Sand, is who that would probably be, in my opinion. But it's still two great pickups. I mean, I would argue that's probably the two best pickups they had this offseason. As far as like immediate plus long-term, I think the Caleb Downs is the best immediate day one impact. I think Julian Sand, if I'm looking at this, take all the other stuff out of it. If I'm Ohio State, I had major questions about the future of their quarterback room. I don't like Devin Brown. I don't like the kid from, say, North Dakota. Is that where you say he was from? South Dakota, wherever. What's his name? It's Lincoln something, right?
Lincoln's something Holtz.
Let me pull it. Just give me a second, right? I don't want to keep butchering this and just keep saying the kid from Idaho. So Lincoln Kienholz, that's who it is.
Sure.
So I'm not a huge fan of him. He was okay coming out, but like Julian Sand to me is the best quarterback recruit they've landed in a few years. So I think that's solidified. I actually like Julian Sand quite a bit. I just don't think he was what they made him out to be. Like, it's kind of like Arch Manning. I thought Arch Manning was a really good quarterback. I just thought them turning him into like the number one quarterback in the country and playing the country was like, okay, that's too much. Same thing with Julian Sand. If Julian Sand would have committed to UCLA, he wouldn't be ranked as a top 10 player. It's because he committed to Bama. That's really what it boils down to. But that doesn't change the fact, Ryan, he's a talented kid. He's a good football player. I like Julian Sand. And if CJ Carr wouldn't have picked Notre Dame and they would have landed Julian Sand, I'd have been happy. I would have, because the fallback option is pretty good. I just think CJ Carr was better, in my personal opinion. So I do think that somewhat stabilizes, because if Kienholz ends up being the guy, you've increased the odds you're going to end up with a good quarterback. Because now it doesn't have to be just Devin Brown or just Lincoln Kienholz. It's like where Notre Dame is at. I don't care if it's Kenny Minchie, CJ Carr, or Deuce Knight. I don't care which one, but by getting all three in a row, you've increased the odds that at least one of them becomes that dude. And that's how I feel like what Julian Sand does. Because I thought Aaron Noland could really run that offense well, but he lacks the physical gifts, in my opinion, of some other guys. I just don't think he has the size of the arm or some of those other traits. I just think he's a smart kid that can read a defense and get the ball where it needs to get to. Julian is more of a playmaker, in my opinion. Somebody just texted me that my dog's in the background. Like, guys, I can see myself on the screen. I know my dog's. And actually, Sadie was just underneath me jumping up on my leg. But I see him. Angela is gone, so I've got the dogs with me the next couple of days. But, yeah, that means they need to go outside here soon. But yeah, that's my thoughts, Ryan. I really think this Julian Sand pickup, if you take away what it means for Aaron Noland and all that, I think it makes a lot of sense for Ohio State to do it, because you don't need him to play right now. You can groom him for a year behind Will Howard, and then let him go out there and compete for the job next year. And you've increased your odds that whoever wins that job, because if Kienholz wins the job, he's gonna have to beat out Julian Sand to do it, and that means he's played well. And if Devin Brown wins a job, and if Devin Brown wins a job, it means he had to beat out Lincoln, Sand, and Aaron Noland if Aaron Noland stays, which means he improved and he's a better player. So that's what I think they've done, is they've raised the floor a little bit on the quarterback position once Will Howard leaves by getting Julian Sand.
Julian Sand's brother is the quarterback at Penn, by the way, UPenn.
Oh, really?
TD Brammy. Yes.
I didn't know
Aiden
that.
Sand. Aiden Sand, yep. TD Brammy, if you were to compare yourself to as podcasters to sport broadcasters, who would it be and what duo would y'all be?
I honestly have no idea. I've never compared myself to anyone.
I'm a very unique podcaster, so I don't think I don't think broadcasters would like me too much, but yeah.
Who is it? So,
who is really smart and likes to have fun? I don't know.
Yeah.
Who's smart and likes to have fun?
So, Ryan, I'm going to go let them out. So if you could just take on the next couple questions. Raymond Harton with Super Chat for puppy food. Thanks, buddy. I appreciate that very, very much. But I'll get you back up here to the top, Ryan, and we'll get you rocking and rolling here. Here's a good one.
Jack Lassen, thank you so much for the Super Chat. Let me move up in my chair because you guys can't see my pretty face on I know this. I know this may be 10 plus years away, but with the way things are trending, if the ACC loses its top tier teams, Clemson, Florida State, Miami, North Carolina, to the Big Ten or SEC, how would you want Notre Dame to adjust their schedule? I mean, Jack, I think the way things are moving, because I think there's two realities that we could be heading to here. Archer, Gus Johnson, and Joel Klatt. That's funny. I would say look, I think that it's a question I don't really know an answer to, Jack, to be honest, right? Because I think that the way we're moving, things can change so differently. I think what people have kind of tried to convince themselves of is that it's just going to be the two major super conferences, right? It's going to be SEC, Big Ten, and then it's just going to kind of be, everyone dissolve at that point, or it's just going to be lower level group of 5, and we're just going to work that way. I'm still very curious to see what happens with the college football landscape. I don't believe, or I don't agree that it's just a foregone conclusion. I actually kind of like what Chip Kelly said a few weeks ago about potential independency in college football. Because if you get to that regard of, instead of the super conference outlook of the college football in the future, if it's more like an independent look, then you're Notre Dame, you're independent. You're free to schedule whoever the heck you want to, as long as it makes sense, right? And if there's not that dependency on the ACC. So long story to get to the point of, I think we need to just be patient with this kind of question, right? We have no idea what the college football landscape is going to be. There's an assumption Big Ten, SEC, and everybody else is just going to dissolve at that point. I'm not as convinced that that's where it's going. I'm not as convinced. I just think that there's a lot of things that need to be figured out, and I'm not sure we have the full answers to yet.
All right, here we go.
We have Archer 452. Given the schedule for the 12-team college football playoff, first round December 20th and 21st, do you think they will move early signing day, currently scheduled for that same week?
No
idea.
They should. I mean, they really should. I think that right now, Ryan, there's enough teams impacted by that. I mean, there's really minimum 8 and to a degree 12, because those other teams are going to be doing some advanced scouting and stuff. I still say the best thing that makes the most sense is to move early signing period before their senior seasons. It's like end of July. It still makes the most sense. That's how it is in basketball. I don't know why it's so hard to do that in football. Oh, it's because the coaches don't want that. That's why. So again, if you wanted to be pro player, then move signing day before their senior seasons, because then if kids that don't want to keep being recruited can get that over with. But coaches don't want that, because coaches don't want kids signing and being in binding contracts, before the season starts. That's who has fought. That's who's primarily fought against moving it up sooner. It's coaches, college coaches.
Yeah. I wonder how many kids would actually sign in that early signing day before their senior season. I'd be very interested to see what the number would be on that.
It would. I think it would vary for schools. Honestly, sure. I mean, I think Notre Dame's last year's class, if I'm thinking about it, I think CJ Carr would have signed early. I think Cam Williams would have signed early. I think Leonard Moore, Carson Hobbs, and there's a decent number of those kids that I think would have signed. Bodie Cahoon, would Jones. Kingston have signed early? I don't know. Would Micah Gilbert have signed early? I don't know him well enough to know the answer to that. Would Aeneas Williams? Yes. Peter Jones? Yes. Anthony Knapp? Yes. Styles Prescott? Yes.
Probably.
I mean, for other schools, I think number would have probably been a little lower, because it depends on what your level of commitment is. And then if you're a school like Notre Dame, now you know who didn't sign. Now you know who's real serious about really being part of this class. Okay, these kids didn't sign. That means they're still open to some things. And you got to start preparing backup options more so than before. So it'd be interesting.
We had our question from Gregory Gilbert. Brian, explain the gold, green, and white pant jersey helmet.
So I asked him to kind of elaborate on this a little bit. What do you mean? What do you mean explain? Just the specifics of it. So to me, the gold helmet's the same gold helmet. The white pants are just a white pant with a I would actually have the blue ND or a gold ND on the pant on the front of the quad, and just like a normal white pant. I would go green jerseys with white numbers and gold outline is what I would do. I'd have ND here. And I would like the shoes. Shoes I'm a little bit back and forth on, Ryan. You know, part of me wants that be the traditional throwback, go black. But I mean, I also kind of like the idea of going gold on gold and green on the shoes as well. And then I would go gold or green gloves, whatever the preference is, preferably gold. I think that would look freaking sweet. I think that'd be awesome. It'd be an awesome uniform combination. I like the white numbers with the gold outline better than gold numbers, to be honest with you. That's just my personal preference.
Yeah, I need to see things to really visualize it. I'm not a very imaginative person. I don't know if people knew that or not, but I'm not extremely imaginative. I'm a good critic though, so if you can put something in front of me, I'll tell you if I like it or not.
You're a visual guy. I get it.
Yes, I'm a very visual learner. Yes.
Yep. All right, last couple before we get out of here.
Orchard 452. How big of a class will 2025 end up being for Notre Dame? Who is the top uncommitted target still on the board? I mean, Brian, like I was doing the math in my head based upon like the parameters that we think. Like, I could see this class getting up to 28. Like, it could be a pretty dang big class, man. Like, because like think about it. I mean, you have your quarterback, you have 2 running backs, talking 3 to 4 wide receivers, you're talking 1 to 2 tight ends, you're talking potentially 4 offensive linemen in the class, 6 defensive linemen, 3 to 4 linebackers, 2 to 3 corners, 2 safeties, 2 to 3 safeties. I mean, like this class could be huge, man. Like it could be a really big class. What's
going to happen over the next 8-9 months is like I'm setting the over under 25. Not even the over under. I'm setting the right now the numbers here, right? And what's going to happen over the next 8 months is it's going to go up or down. And by down, it could be something as simple as, you know, hey, some younger guys in our team are panning out that maybe we didn't expect to pan out, that we thought we were going to over recruit. So our need here isn't as great as it was, right? Or it could be a couple guys we thought, you know, we were comfortable with 2 to 3 linebackers, but maybe a couple guys that we thought were going to pan out have gotten injured or whatever else the case may be. And now we have a greater need. So now it eventually gets up. And then the other part of it is just going to be, I think the staff is going to start over recruiting, because they know kids are going to leave. I mean, kids are going to jump in the portal for money. Kids are going to jump in the portal because they're not playing there. And Notre Dame is wisely saying, like, right now, 28 makes no sense, Ryan. If you and I are sitting here and looking at the roster the same way we did 3-4 years ago, we're like, dude, there's no way you get to 28. No way. It's just not humanly possible. You'd have to cut X number of kids from your team, and I don't see how that happens. But the universe that we're in now, Notre Dame's like, look, we just lost 13 scholarship kids this offseason. Some of them we wanted to lose, some of them we didn't. You know, and that's going to happen. So you have to contemplate oversigning now. I think it's actually, and I don't think the previous staff would have done this. I think the previous staff would have just worked with a normal recruiting situation. I think this staff was like, look, we're going to lose some kids, either by choice or by not, and we're just going to keep recruiting the best players we can. And if that means sometimes over-recruiting a player in the class, I think this staff is going to be a little bit more prone to that. I'm not sure how I feel about that, Ryan, but I think we might see that a little bit too. Like, you know, hey, you got 2 running backs, but what if some stud running back still wants to come?
Or what if somebody decommits at some point? I mean, like, so you have to figure out that number.
Right. Yep. So I think you're going to see this staff be very aggressive with numbers. Because just so you understand, I'm not saying your number 28 is nuts. I think I can see that. What I'm saying is if you'd have thrown that number out 3-4 years ago under the parameters in which the world worked in college football, 28 would have been nuts. It's like, dude, there's no way. The math doesn't make sense. I don't know how you're going to get there. So I just want to make sure I'm not saying that you're nuts for saying that now. I think now it makes total sense. 25 to 28 would be a reasonable number. I'm just saying 25 for now, depending on how some kids pan out. I could see it getting up to 28, 29. And if some kids maybe do pan out or your situation a little better, then maybe you're 25 to 23. But if I had to bet, I'd say I'd take the over as of right now.
People always ask when's the best chance Notre Dame's going to have a top 3 class, a top 5 class, whatever it is. Well, they get to 28. That's the year that it could potentially happen, man. That's a big number.
It really is. It really is.
Backup says, from an off-the-bus standpoint, will Notre Dame be bigger or smaller this season? Bigger, right? Like,
yeah, I think so.
Yeah, bigger.
Yeah, I think
because,
so.
Like, you have to think about it like this. I mean, like, you're losing Joe Alt, who is an All-American, but you're actually upgrading in terms of like mass at left tackle,
Yeah.
right? Because you're going from 322 Joe Alt, who's a massively imposing dude, to 330 plus Charles Jagasaw, right? Like you technically upgraded as far as density and size at left tackle. Even that's it's wild
Ashton
to think
Craig's going to
about.
look better off the bus than
Zeke
Carell did. Charles
Yep.
Jagasaw is going to look better coming off the bus than Joe Alt did, just from a massiveness standpoint. To your point,
Yep.
You're losing 6'6", 310-pound Blake Fisher, but you're replacing him with 6'8", 310-pound Tosh Baker. You're losing J.D. Bertrand and you're replacing him with Kingston Viliama-Asa. Because Drake Bone is already getting off the bus, but then it's the younger guys. It's like, so you've added Peter Jones, who's a good-looking kid. You've added Gerby Lambert, who's a 6'7", 300-plus pound kid. You know what I mean? Like, you're going to have Drake Bone and Kingston Viliama-Asa getting off the bus if we're talking about Mike linebackers. You know what I mean? Like, so, and Bodie Cahoon's not taking a back seat to any linebacker that Notre Dame lost off last year's roster. You know what I mean?
Even the tight end rotation, which like Holden Stace is like 6'4" plus, like 240 something. Like he's not a small kid by any means, but now your 3-man tight end room is going to be, when Mitchell Evans gets back, it's going to be 6'5" plus, 250 plus pound Mitchell Evans, followed by 6'6" plus 255 pound Eli Raridan, and then 6'5", 6'6", 260 pounds Cooper Flanagan. It's like, that's a massively impressive.
Mitchell Evans is going to be your small tight end next year. Think about that.
Yeah.
Mitchell Evans will be your smallest tight end next year of the three.
Out of the rotation, yes.
Yeah.
Out of the rotation,
the only place where Notre Dame is going to get smaller is running back. But even then, it's like Jadarian Price gets off the bus, he's got a tank top on, and you're like, holy crap. You know what I mean?
And who knows what gains Jeremiah Love is going to make in the offseason, right?
Right.
Like, you
and
never know,
yes, you lose Audric, who's 5'11", 227, and you replace him with Kedron Young, who's 5'11", 225. You know what I mean? Like, he's not as chiseled as Audric was, but he's not. You saw him. He's not a small kid by any stretch of the imagination. He's not small.
By the way, I don't know if you saw this on Twitter, but Dane Brugler put out an age thing for the 2024 NFL draft. Audric Estime is the third youngest player in this draft. He's only 20 years old, 20.6 years, like 20, whatever. I don't know when his birthday is, but he's literally going to be 20. He's going to be 20 when the draft happens, which is wild to think about. And he's a massive kid, massive.
One of our listeners reached out to me the other day and was like, hey, Notre Dame's going to see this. There's this running back that goes to a school that Notre Dame's going to be visiting soon. And he's a kid named Messiah Mickens. So the guy sends me the name. And so I looked the kid up and I'm like, there's no way that's a 26 kid. No way. There's no way that's 2000. Because you just look at him in the face, he looks like he's like 28 years old. And it's wild, man. But like Audric looks like he's a 7-year NFL veteran right now. When you look at him in the face and his body and all those type of things. But I didn't know he was that young. That's wild.
Yeah. He's going to be 20 throughout like a decent portion of his first season in the NFL, which is why does he go to the NFL? That's why, guys. That's why. You're only 20 as a running back. That's fantastic, man. Good for you.
Yeah. That's amazing.
He's going to get to a second contract potentially by the age of 24.
That's
great for him.
Does that make a running back? I don't know the answer to this, Ryan. It's a genuine question. Does that make a running back more attractive to NFL teams being that young?
100%.
Okay.
Yeah, you can count on a first contract. Yeah, well, yes. Either way, I think yes, because he's younger, and you have to account for, like, some people will put like the tread on the tire thing, but also the age counts into this too, right? Is that, I mean, he's a 1-year full-time starter, 2-year contributor for Notre Dame, so the tread isn't that crazy on his tires in general, and he's more than likely to get to a second contract. That makes you more valuable. When you're talking about a running back coming in that's like 23, it's like, guys, even if he doesn't have that much tread on his tire, by the age of running backs 27 or 28, like, is he going to get to that second contract? I have no idea. But a 24-year-old Audric Estime probably getting to a second contract, which is great for him. Great for him.
Here's an interesting.
He might get to a third contract, man. He might get to a third contract.
This is the first number that popped in my head, Ryan. The comparison is Derrick Henry, and I just looked at it. Derrick Henry is 22 in his rookie year. Yeah. And so when he was 24, when he got to his first contract, well, for him, it's a little bit different because he was a first rounder. So he was 22, 23, 24, 26. But in Audric's situation, we don't expect to be a first round draft pick. he'd have been 20, 23, 24, 22, 23, 20, 25. You know what I mean? So that's interesting. Very interesting.
Yeah,
no,
great
yeah,
for him, man.
25 and then so that's very interesting. And as you said, he's carried the ball a decent amount the last 2 years, but not a ton the year before. I mean, he split carries with Logan the year before. He's only got 1 year as a full time. He's the guy, and even then, he didn't exactly like light the world on fire in regards to. I shouldn't light the world on fire. That's not the right way I meant to use it, but he didn't like get crazy carries this year, in my opinion.
Right.
It wasn't.
Yep.
So, all right. Last.
He's in a good spot, man. Young and not crazy tread. That's a good combination
absolutely.
as a running back. So.
Absolutely.
Yep.
All right. Last couple here, and then we're definitely going to get out after these two.
Notre Dame for life. Can Notre Dame football use other sports on campus scholarships?
No. Once a kid plays a down of now, they can just to have on the roster, but like you can stash a kid. So like you could actually do this if you had a kid that, let's say, you thought was going to be a red shirt. I don't know. You have let's use Charles Jagasol as an example. Okay.
Yep.
And he's a kid that's actually he's not a good. Let's use James Flanagan as an example. This is a good one. James Flanagan's a really good. It's discus
hockey,
right?
Well, he's a discus shot putter, and he's a really good hockey player too. So
so let's say that you're gonna have the track team stash him for a year because you're tight on numbers. He's gonna redshirt in year one. He can be on your team. He can practice and all that kind of stuff. But the minute you play him, you not take it. So you could use it like to stash a guy for a year. But with the way that modern redshirt rules are, Ryan, if you like a kid like James Flanagan, you're going to want to get him snaps in 2 or 3 or 4 games, most likely. And once you do that, it's kind of a waste of time. So it would only have to be a situation where a kid is going to redshirt and you're flat out okay with him not playing a single snap that year. That's the only way you could do it. And again, I don't know that other sports are going to want to do that unless like anyone that's good enough in track or basketball or baseball to take one of their full scholarships. They give out very few full scholarships and partial scholarships and things like that. Any kids that's good enough to do that in that sport is probably pretty good in football. And if a kid's good enough that you're going to want him at Notre Dame, he's not going to take a partial scholarship and pay his own way for part of a year at a place like Notre Dame very often. Guys like Luke Talich are very, 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 very rare where they're going to turn down a Utah and a Washington State to come to Notre Dame. And the reality is they're not doing that for 4. I'd be shocked if Luke Talich came to Notre Dame with the thought he's going to be a 4-year walk-on. I highly doubt that. Doubt that. Nor did the Notre Dame coaches come with him thinking he's going to be a 4-year walk-on. That's the other part of it too, Ryan, is they're saying too, like, if we want to keep this kid, we're going to have to eventually give him a scholarship. And I think he'll get one sooner rather than later. I mean, kid started on special teams for Notre Dame this year as a true freshman. They like him. Clearly, they like that kid. And it makes it a bummer that he had the injury he had as well.
Yeah. I forget about. Oh, here, quick trivia question for you. James Flanagan, as a sophomore, set the county discus record. Okay, do you know whose record he broke?
It wasn't his dad's. No, his dad's not from.
It was his dad.
It was his dad.
It was his dad. Jim Flanagan Jr. Yeah, he threw like 170 something, and then I think James hit like 180.
Nice.
For context, I was considered a very good discus thrower, and I threw 150, and he threw 180 as a sophomore.
Okay.
So
that's impressive. That's impressive.
Pretty good.
His junior film was really good, by the way.
Yeah.
I regraded all the commits this weekend, and he jumped in the top 100 for me.
I'm also pretty sure he is he has gone undefeated in hockey the last 2 years and a couple state championships as well. So
isn't he supposedly like actually a good hockey? Not just he's on the team. He's actually supposedly a good hockey player, right?
I'm pretty sure he's the best hockey player on the team, I believe, if I remember correctly. So yeah,
that was a heck of a pickup. I sometimes think that by some he might be overlooked a little bit because he's the legacy thing.
Yeah,
but I think he's really. I liked him as a sophomore. His sophomore film was really good, but his junior film was even better. I was like, okay, he graded out.
He could play either side too at Notre Dame if he wanted to. I believe too. He could play defensive end for sure.
He played a bunch of linebacker for them this past year too, Ryan. Yep. Like he wasn't just playing defensive end; he was playing a lot of linebacker for them. It was impressive.
Started middle linebacker. Yep. We had PQ. What it do? Is there any aspect of building the team and running the program that Marcus Freeman does that you don't agree with? How would you do it differently?
Well, I don't know that I would say there's something I would do differently. I would simply say, because I don't know that I know enough about the day to day to say there's things he need to do differently. I think the reality is the culture, as we've talked about before, the culture still needs improvement. Is that something he's doing differently, or is it more of it just takes time and getting guys in that you've recruited that have bought in and getting guys out who maybe you didn't? So I don't know if it's so much the process. I think there's a lot of things that Marcus Freeman is still learning as being a head coach, how to manage your staff, how to create accountability. Those are all things that I think as an assistant coach, when you're a first-time head coach, you have a way that you think a staff should be run based on your experience as an assistant coach. And then when you become a head coach, you're like, yeah, that doesn't work with everybody. And it's got to be this way. And I think there's things like that are going on that he's learning from. So I don't know that I'd say he'd do it differently. He just needs to experience it. And so, but whatever he's doing with the culture, he's got to make sure that he's getting this team needs to be tougher mentally and physically still. There's been improvement, but it's not where it needs to be yet. Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think the things that you can observe, like I like the tempo in practice. I thought that was run really well. I'm not there on an everyday basis, so I can't really comment on that. I think that there has definitely been progress from just a mindset perspective at Notre Dame and players buying in more. So I think, I mean, structurally, like I think Marcus Freeman's going in the right direction from just a CEO, a developer of a program. The only questions that I have is, just some offensive stuff, right? Like, can you open it up? Can you be, and he answered a little bit of that question this offseason, I think, potentially. I mean, like hiring Mike Denbrock shows that it probably is very good signs in that department. So I've liked most of the coaching hires that he's made for a large part. So we'll see if it can work out. But I think that Marcus Freeman is definitely going in the right direction. It's about staying consistent, man. And he seems like a guy that's going to stay consistent. So we shall see how it ends up.
Well, I think his demeanor this offseason too, Ryan, has been big for me. Just like you've seen a very aggressive Marcus Freeman this offseason. Like a little bit of a chip on his shoulder, kind of ticked off Marcus Freeman this offseason.
I like that they've been a lot more aggressive in the portal and such. I feel like they're learning a lot, and they're continuing to expand in that regard, which is always great progress. Yeah,
definitely being bolder. Same thing on the recruiting trail, all of it. Yes, all of it's really important. All right, Mr. Roberts, that is going to be it. We did have a last comment from Andre Tonsel. If not on the IB boards, get on now. That is tremendous advice, Andre. Appreciate that very, 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 very much. And Jason Smith, I second that, Andre. I third it. Thanks, guys. Appreciate you very, very much. Ryan, why don't you go and take us out of here, man?
Yeah, no, appreciate everybody. Like they said, boards.irishbreakdown.com. I had a couple intel pieces over the weekend for Junior Day. I think it's going to be a very busy next few weeks of recruiting. I mean, coaches on the road and obviously the momentum that you created after Junior Day. So make sure to go sign up at boards.irishbreakdown.com. Free content at irishbreakdown.com. I'll have several more visit recaps coming out over the next couple of days as well. So make sure that you stay locked there. If you're listening to us live on YouTube, if you can just hit that like button for us at the bottom of the screen, make sure you're subscribed to the podcast and the notification bell is hit as well for know when the next show is coming up very shortly. If you're listening to us on your favorite podcast platform, 5-star reviews are very much appreciated, and subscriptions over there are much appreciated as well. If you want to hit a review on that 5-star review, that would also be very, very appreciated as well. So we'll talk to you again. We'll be back next time here on the Irish Breakdown Podcast.